I quietly changed my bank accounts and got new cards. When I got home, my wife and her son were waiting for me screaming. "What did you do?" "Our cards stopped working at the dealership." I looked at them calmly and said, "I know I reported them stolen." They froze. But that was just the first domino in a chain reaction that would leave them homeless. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entire lives piece by piece, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you have ever had to cut off a family member who mistook your kindness for weakness. My name is Harold Banks, and I am 72 years old. Most people look at me and see just another retired black man moving a little slower than he used to, maybe walking with a cane on the bad days. They do not see the mind that designed 3 of the tallest skyscrapers in Chicago. They do not see the patents for sustainable concrete that made me a fortune before I turned 50. And they certainly do not see the rage burning cold and steady beneath my tailored suit. I spent my life calculating loads and stresses, ensuring that the structures I built could withstand hurricanes and earthquakes. Yet ironically, I failed to notice the structural rot in the foundation of my own home until the roof was about to collapse on my head. I live in a sprawling estate in the hills just outside of Atlanta. It is a house I designed myself with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the pines and a library that smells of cedar and old paper. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, my reward for 40 years of grinding work. Instead, it had become a nest of vipers. My wife, Veronica, is 30 years my junior. When we met 10 years ago, I was lonely, a widower who missed the sound of a voice other than my own in the hallways. She was beautiful, vibrant, and she listened to my stories about architecture with what I thought was genuine interest. I was a fool. A rich, lonely fool is the easiest mark in the world. She came with baggage, specifically a son named Trey, who was 14 then and 24 now. Trey is what happens when you combine laziness with entitlement and marinate it in someone else's money. He has never held a job for longer than 3 weeks, yet he drives a Range Rover that I paid for and wears watches that cost more than my first car. And then there is Amber, Trey's fiancée, a 23-year-old white girl with eyes like a calculator and a smile that never quite reaches them. She moved in 6 months ago because they were saving for a place of their own, or so they said. In reality, she moved in because the service here is excellent and the rent is free. For the last few months, I had been feeling weak. My heart would race for no reason. My hands shook. I felt a fog in my brain that terrified me more than any physical pain. I thought it was age. I thought it was the end approaching. Veronica was so attentive during these episodes, bringing me special herbal teas, insisting I rest taking over the household finances because I was too tired to look at spreadsheets. But I am an architect. I noticed details. I noticed that the fog always rolled in about 30 minutes after my afternoon tea. I noticed that Veronica and Trey stopped asking me for money and started talking in hushed tones when I entered the room. So I did what any prudent man who values his security would do. I installed a closed-circuit camera system, not the cheap ones you buy at the hardware store that beep and flash. I installed pinhole cameras in the molding of the ceiling, hidden in the smoke detectors invisible to the naked eye. I wired them to a private server that only I could access from my study. That Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in my leather armchair in the library. The door was locked. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn. On my desk sat a steaming cup of chamomile tea that Veronica had just brought me, kissing my forehead and telling me to drink it while it was hot. I looked at the cup. Then I looked at the computer monitors. I pulled up the feed from the living room. They were there, the 3 of them. Veronica was lounging on the white sofa drinking a glass of my best Chardonnay. Trey was playing a video game on the 80-inch screen, his feet propped up on the coffee table. Amber was pacing back and forth, scrolling on her phone. The audio was crystal clear. "How much longer do we have to wait?" Amber snapped. She stopped pacing and glared at Trey. The developer for the penthouse called again. "They need the deposit by Friday or we lose the unit." Trey didn't look up from his game. "Ask Mom. She is the one handling the old man." Veronica swirled her wine, looking at the light through the golden liquid. "Be patient, Amber. These things take time. If we rush it, it looks suspicious. His heart is strong. His. Too strong. The doctor said he has the constitution of an ox." Amber let out a frustrated groan. "He is 72. He is not supposed to live forever. God, he is so stubborn. Even his body refuses to quit." Veronica laughed a low, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. That is why I upped the dose today. Double the foxglove extract in his chamomile. It mimics a natural arrhythmia. If he goes into cardiac arrest tonight, the autopsy will just show heart failure. He is old. Nobody will ask questions. My hand froze halfway to the cup of tea on my desk. Foxglove. Digitalis. A plant that can regulate the heart in small doses but stop it cold in large ones. She wasn't just nursing me, she was murdering me. I watched the screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. But what about the power of attorney, Amber asked, sitting down next to Veronica. If he dies before he signs it, we have to wait for probate. That could take a year. I am not waiting a year, Veronica. I want that penthouse now. He is getting weaker, Veronica assured her. I saw his hands shaking this morning. He is confused. Tonight or tomorrow, when he starts feeling the palpitations, I will tell him it is stress. I will tell him he needs to let me handle the legal burden so he can rest. I have the papers ready in the safe. Once he signs over the power of attorney, we can drain the liquid assets before the ambulance even gets here. Trey laughed, throwing his controller down. Damn, Mom, you are cold. Remind me never to piss you off. Veronica reached over and ruffled his hair. I am doing this for us, baby. You deserve the best. Harold has had his time. He is just taking up space now. Taking up space. I sat back in my chair. The silence in the library was deafening. I looked at the walls I had built, the books I had collected, the life I had constructed brick by brick. To them, I was not a person. I was an obstacle. I was a vault that was taking too long to open. I looked at the tea again. Steam was still rising from it, curling into the air like a phantom. A mixture of terror and clarity washed over me. For months, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was dying. But I wasn't dying. I was being exterminated. I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I picked up the cup of tea. I walked over to the large potted fern in the corner of the room. I poured the liquid into the soil. Drink up, I whispered to the plant. I went back to my desk. I opened the drawer and took out a bottle of activated charcoal pills I had bought days ago on a hunch. I swallowed 4 of them dry. They wanted me weak. They wanted me confused. They wanted a senile old man who would sign away his empire for a moment of peace. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I am not just an old man. I am a man who navigated the cutthroat world of construction in the 70s and 80s when men like me weren't welcomed in the boardroom. I have dealt with unions, mobsters, and corrupt city officials. I know how to spot a structural weakness, and I know how to bring a building down so that it falls exactly where I want it to. I looked at the screen one last time. Veronica was refilling her wine glass. Amber was showing Trey pictures of the penthouse on her phone. They looked so happy, so confident, so safe. They had no idea that the man they were planning to bury was watching them. I reached for my phone. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police would ask for proof. They would take the tea for testing. It would be a long, drawn-out investigation. Veronica would play the weeping wife. Trey would play the grieving son. They might even get away with it, or worse, freeze my assets during the investigation. No. I wanted something more absolute. I wanted to strip them bare. I wanted to take away the one thing that made them tolerate my existence. The money. I opened my banking app. I looked at the balances. Millions. Liquid. Accessible. I picked up my black leather notebook and a fountain pen. I started making a list. Item 1, new bank accounts. Item 2, the trust. Item 3, the will. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I sat back and waited. I needed to act normal. I needed to go downstairs and pretend to be the sick, dying old man they expected. I needed to give them one last night of hope. I unlocked the library door. I ruffled my hair to look disheveled. I practiced a slight tremor in my left hand. I walked out into the hallway. I could hear their laughter coming from the living room. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy the wine. Enjoy the games. Enjoy the soft leather of the couch. Because tomorrow, the eviction begins. I walked down the stairs, leaning heavily on the banister. Veronica. I called out, my voice shaky and weak. The tea, it was very good. But I am feeling tired. So tired. I heard the rustle of movement. Veronica appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her face arranged in a mask of perfect concern. "Oh, Harold," she said, rushing up to take my arm. "I told you, darling, you need to rest. Come, let me help you to bed." She guided me up the stairs, her grip firm, her perfume cloying and sweet. "Did you finish the tea?" she asked casually. Every drop I lied. "Good," she said. Good. It will help you sleep. I let her lead me to the bedroom. I let her tuck me in. I let her kiss my cheek with those poison lips. Sleep well, Harold, she whispered. I closed my eyes. I waited until the door clicked shut. I waited until I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. Then I opened my eyes in the dark. I didn't sleep. I lay there planning, calculating, designing the demolition of my own family. They wanted my heart to stop, but they had just jump-started it. The morning sun hit the floorboards of my bedroom with a cheerful indifference that felt almost insulting given the poison coursing through the household. I woke up alive, which was the first victory of the day and likely the first disappointment for my wife, Veronica. I lay there for a moment listening to the silence of the house. It was the silence of a structure that was still standing despite the termites eating away at the beams. I checked my pulse. It was steady. The activated charcoal had done its job absorbing the foxglove she had slipped into my tea the night before. I was weak, but I was not dying. Not today. I dressed slowly, putting on the performance of a man on his last legs. I chose a beige cardigan over a button-down shirt, the kind of outfit that screams retiree. I grabbed my cane. When I walked into the kitchen, Veronica was already there chopping fruit with a knife that glinted too sharply in the morning light. She looked up, and for a split second I saw the calculation in her eyes, the assessment of my pallor, the check to see if I was stumbling. "Good morning, Harold," she said, her voice dripping with that synthetic sweetness that used to fool me. "You look pale, darling. Are you sure you should be going out? The doctor said you need bed rest." I leaned heavily on my cane, letting my hand tremble just enough to sell the lie. "I have an appointment, Veronica. Just a routine checkup with Dr. Evans. He wants to monitor the arrhythmia." She wiped her hands on a towel and walked over to me, fixing my collar. Her hands were cold. "Maybe I should drive you," she suggested. "You shouldn't be behind the wheel in your condition." I knew why she wanted to drive me. She wanted to make sure I actually went to the doctor. She wanted to hear the prognosis firsthand. She wanted a timeline for when she could order the casket. "No," I said, patting her hand. "You have so much to do here. I will take the town car. It is a slow drive. I need the quiet." She hesitated, but then she smiled. It was the smile of a woman who has already won and decides to be gracious to the loser. "All right, darling. Call me as soon as you are done. And don't stop for coffee. Your heart can't take the caffeine. My heart, I thought, can take a lot more than you think." I walked out to the garage. My vintage Jaguar was parked next to Trey's Range Rover. I looked at the SUV I had paid for the one he treated like a trash can on wheels. There was a fast food wrapper on the dashboard. Disgusting. I got into my car and started the engine. As I pulled out of the driveway, I watched the rearview mirror. Veronica was standing in the window watching me go. I waited until I turned the corner and was out of sight before I straightened my spine. The trembling stopped. The fog cleared. I wasn't a patient today. I was a man on a mission. I didn't go to Dr. Evans. I drove straight to the financial district downtown. The skyscrapers I had helped design loomed overhead, steel and glass giants that reminded me of what I was capable of. I parked in the underground garage of the First National Bank building and took the elevator up to the 30th floor. My lawyer Steinberg was waiting for me. He is a man of few words and even fewer smiles, which is exactly why I like him. We have been friends for 40 years. He knows where the bodies are buried because he helped me dig the holes for the foundations. "Harold," he said, standing up as I walked in, "you look like hell." "I feel like hell," I admitted, sitting down in the leather chair opposite his desk. "But I am lucid." "Did you prepare the papers?" Steinberg slid a thick folder across the mahogany desk. "The bank's family revocable trust," he said. Or rather, the new one. The irrevocable trust. Once you sign this, your assets are moved into a legal entity that you control but do not technically own personally. It shields the money from probate creditors and, most importantly, greedy spouses. I opened the folder. The numbers were staggering. My life's work, my patents, my savings, all of it was about to be locked away in a fortress that Veronica didn't have the key to, and the beneficiary I asked. Steinberg pointed to the clause. "The Herald Banks Foundation. Upon your death, 90% goes to charity. 10% remains in a stipend fund for family members subject to drug testing and employment verification." I smiled. Trey would never pass a drug test. And Veronica had never held a job in her life. I signed the papers. The scratch of the pen on the paper sounded like a lock clicking shut. "Now the accounts," I said. We walked down to the main branch of the bank located in the lobby of the same building. I had requested a private meeting with the branch manager, Mr. Sterling. He was a nervous man who sweated when the market dipped, but he was efficient. "Mr. Banks, surely a pleasure, Mr. Sterling said, ushering us into his glass-walled office. "Coffee." "Water," I said. "Just water." I sat down. Sterling looked at Steinberg, then back at me. He sensed the tension. In banking, tension usually means money is moving, and banks hate when money moves. "Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice low and even, "I need to review the activity on my joint checking and savings accounts for the last 30 days. Certainly. Mr. Sterling typed on his keyboard. He frowned. He adjusted his glasses. He clicked the mouse a few times. "Is there a problem, Mr. Banks?" he asked. "You tell me," I said. He printed out a statement and handed it to me. It was 5 pages long. I scanned the list. It was a catalog of excess, a testament to gluttony. Nordstrom, $3,000. Porsche of Atlanta, $5,000 deposit. The Diamond Vault, $12,000. Club One nightclub, $4,000 in one night. That was Trey. Cash withdrawals, $500 here, $1,000 there. Daily. The total for the month was $52,000. $52,000 in 30 days. I felt the rage bubbling up again, hot and acrid in my throat. They weren't just spending my money. They were eating me alive. They were stripping the flesh from my bones while I was still breathing. Veronica had told me she needed money for groceries. She said inflation was high. She said the pool needed repairs. She lied. She was buying diamonds while feeding me poison. "Mr. Sterling," I said, putting the paper down on the desk. "This activity, it is unusual. It is certainly higher than your average monthly spend." Mr. Sterling agreed, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "But since Mrs. Banks is a co-signer on the account." I looked him dead in the eye. "Mr. Sterling, I did not authorize these charges." The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. "I beg your pardon," Mr. Sterling stammered. "But she has a card. It is a joint account." "I am telling you that I did not authorize these specific transactions," I repeated, my voice turning to steel. "I believe my identity may have been compromised. I believe there is fraud involved." Sterling looked at Steinberg, who sat silently in the corner, arms crossed. "Fraud," Sterling whispered. "That is a serious accusation, Mr. Banks. If we flag this, it will freeze the accounts. It will trigger an investigation. The cards associated with these accounts will be declined immediately." "Do it," I said. "But sir, if Mrs. Banks tries to use her card, it will be declined." I finished for him. "That is the point. I want you to close the joint accounts effective immediately. Transfer the remaining balance, roughly $4 million, into the new trust account number I have here." I slid the paper Steinberg had given me across the desk. "Leave the joint account open with a nominal balance, say $500, enough to keep it active but insufficient for anything they want to buy." Sterling looked pale. He was watching a high-value client dismantle his marriage in real time. "And Mr. Sterling," I added, leaning forward, "I want you to issue a new debit card for the trust account. One card, in my name only, no secondary users, no authorized signers, just me." He nodded, typing furiously. "I can do that, sir. But regarding the fraud alert, do you want to file a police report?" "Not yet," I said. "Let the bank's internal fraud department handle it. Just mark the transactions as suspicious. Flag the users. Put a hold on any credit increases." I watched him work. I watched him sever the lifeline that Veronica and Trey had been sucking on for years. It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes to undo 10 years of financial entanglement. When he handed me the new black debit card, it felt heavy. It felt like a weapon. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I said, standing up. "Mr. Banks." Sterling said, standing up as well, his hand damp as he shook mine. I hope everything resolves itself." "It will," I said. "One way or another." I walked out of the bank with Steinberg. We stood on the sidewalk, the city noise washing over us. "You know what happens next," Harold Steinberg said. "When she finds out." "I know," I said, checking my watch. "She is probably at the Porsche dealership right now with Trey. They were talking about picking up the new Macan today." Steinberg smirked. "That is going to be an embarrassing moment." I adjusted my cane. "Embarrassment is the least of her problems, Arthur. She is about to find out that the Bank of Harold Banks is under new management." I got back into my Jaguar. I put the new black card in my wallet right next to my driver's license. I took the old joint card, the one Veronica had access to, and I snapped it in half. I drove home slowly, taking the scenic route. I wanted to give them time. I wanted them to have that moment of panic at the register. I wanted them to call the bank and hear the automated message saying their account was frozen. I wanted them to be waiting for me. As I turned onto the winding road that led to my estate, I saw the storm clouds gathering overhead. It was fitting. I wasn't the sick old man anymore. I was the architect. And I had just pulled the keystone out of the arch. The collapse was beginning, and I was going to enjoy the view. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of my Jaguar as I pulled up to the house I had designed 30 years ago. It was a masterpiece of mid-century modern architecture with clean lines and cantilevered terraces that floated above the Georgia pines. But today, it looked less like a home and more like a coliseum waiting for the gladiators to enter. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment listening to the silence. My heart was beating with a steady rhythm, a slow, heavy drum that reminded me I was still alive, still fighting and completely in control. I touched the new black debit card in my wallet just to make sure it was real. It was the key to my freedom and the detonator to their destruction. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the front door. I didn't rush. I leaned on my cane, tapping it against the slate walkway with a deliberate cadence. Click, click, click. The sound of the countdown. I expected them to be home. I expected the anger. But I was not prepared for the sheer wall of noise that hit me the moment I opened the heavy oak door. It was chaos. "Harold, where have you been?" Veronica screamed from the living room, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. She came storming into the foyer, her face flushed a mottled red that clashed with her expensive silk blouse. Behind her stood Trey, looking like a kicked puppy, and Amber, who was pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, her heels clicking furiously on the hardwood floors. I closed the door behind me and locked it slowly. I took off my hat. I hung it on the rack. I turned to face them with the bewildered expression of a man who just wanted a nap. "What is going on, Veronica?" I asked, keeping my voice soft and confused. "Why are you shouting? My head hurts." "Don't you give me that tired old man act," Veronica snapped, marching up to me and poking a manicured finger into my chest. "Do you have any idea how humiliated we were today? Do you—" "Humiliated?" I repeated, blinking innocently. "I don't understand." "We were at the Porsche dealership," Trey yelled from the couch. He didn't even stand up to address me. He just shouted over the back of the sofa. "We had the Macan picked out. It was perfect. Matte black, red interior. We were signing the papers. Harold." The salesman was shaking my hand. And then, he threw his hands up in the air. Then what I asked, moving slowly into the living room. Then the card was declined. Amber hissed, stopping her pacing to glare at me. Declined. Invalid. Do not honor. The machine beeped so loud the whole showroom heard it. The manager looked at us like we were criminals, like we were trying to steal the car. Trey stood up, then his face twisted in that ugly way it does when he doesn't get what he wants. "I tried the backup card," Trey said, "the one linked to the savings. Declined. I tried Mom's card. Declined. We looked like idiots, Harold. I had to leave the car there. I had to call an Uber. Do you know what it feels like to take an Uber home from a Porsche dealership?" I listened to them. I watched their faces. And inside, I was smiling. I was laughing. The image of Trey standing there with his entitled smirk being wiped off by a credit card terminal was the best medicine I had had in years. I sat down in my armchair, groaning slightly as I settled in. I rubbed my temples. "Oh dear," I said, "that sounds terrible, truly terrible." "Fix it," Veronica demanded, standing over me. "Call the bank right now. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them to authorize the charge. I am not going to let that salesman think we are broke. I want that car in the driveway by tomorrow morning." I looked up at her. I looked at the woman who had put poison in my tea the night before. She was so confident in her power over me. She thought I was just a broken ATM machine that needed a good kick to start dispensing cash again. "I can't fix it, Veronica," I said quietly. "What do you mean you can't?" Amber snapped, stepping closer. "You are Harold Banks. You own half the skyline. Just make a call." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the receipt the bank manager, Mr. Sterling, had printed for me, the one with the fraud alert stamp on it. "I went to the bank this morning," I lied smoothly. "I got a call from the fraud department. They said there was suspicious activity on our accounts, massive spending, $50,000 in 1 month. I watched them freeze. The air left the room. $50,000, I repeated, looking at the paper and then looking at them. The bank thinks our identity was stolen. They think someone has cloned our cards and is draining our life savings. Veronica's eyes darted to Trey. Trey looked at the floor. Amber bit her lip. They knew exactly where that $50,000 went. It went to the diamonds on Veronica's wrist. It went to the bottle service at the club Trey went to last week. It went to the down payment on the penthouse they were secretly trying to buy. But they couldn't admit it. If they admitted it, they would be admitting to stealing from me. So I played the fool. It is terrifying. I continued, shaking my head. The banker, Mr. Sterling, told me these criminals are sophisticated. They spend thousands at luxury stores to blend in. He said he had to take immediate action to protect us. Protect us. How? Veronica asked, her voice tight. He froze everything I said. He locked the accounts. He canceled the cards. He said until they can determine which charges are real and which are fraudulent, no money goes in or out. Amber let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. You let him freeze the accounts, she shrieked. Are you insane? How are we supposed to live? How are we supposed to pay for the wedding? How are we supposed to get the apartment? I looked at Amber. She was showing her hand. She didn't care about me. She didn't care about the fraud. She just cared about the flow of money. It is standard procedure, Amber, I said, keeping my voice calm. It is a federal investigation now. The bank has to audit every single transaction for the last year. Every transaction, Trey whispered. His face went pale. He was thinking about the cash withdrawals. He was thinking about the time he used the business card for his gambling debts. Yes, I said. Every single one. Mr. Sterling said it will take 30 days, maybe 60. 60 days, Veronica gasped. She sat down on the sofa heavily as if her legs had given out. Harold, we can't live for 60 days with no money. We have bills, the gardener, the chef, the country club dues. I leaned forward on my cane. I looked at them with the stern expression of a father disappointed in his children. We have no choice, Veronica, I said. If we try to override the freeze, the bank will think we are complicit in the fraud. We could go to jail. Do you want to go to jail? Veronica shook her head quickly. No, of course not. Then we have to wait, I said. And while we wait, we have to change things. Change what? Trey asked suspiciously. We have to tighten our belts, I said. The phrase hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Tighten our belts, Amber repeated as if the words were in a foreign language. What does that mean? It means austerity, I said. It means we stop the bleeding. The bank gave me a temporary allowance card, a debit card with a very strict limit, just enough for food and utilities. I pulled out the black card. I held it up. It glinted in the light. This is it, I said. This is all we have for the next 2 months, so I am firing the staff today. What? Veronica screamed. You can't fire the staff. Who will cook? Who will clean? You will, I said simply. You have hands, Veronica. You know how to use a vacuum. And the gardener, I continued. Gone. Trey, you are young and strong. You can mow the lawn. Me, Trey sputtered. I have allergies, Harold. I can't mow the lawn. Then the grass will grow tall, I said, shrugging. And the cars. We don't need 3 cars, especially not gas guzzlers. We will park the Range Rover and the Jaguar. We will use the old sedan for errands. Gas is expensive. This is ridiculous, Amber shouted. This is abuse. You are doing this on purpose. You have millions, Harold. You have secret accounts. I know you do. You are just being a miser. I looked at her. Her mask had slipped completely. She wasn't the sweet future daughter-in-law anymore. She was a predator who had just realized the cage door was locked. I wish I did, Amber, I said, my voice full of fake regret. But the market has been hard, and with this fraud, well, we might not be as rich as you think we are. I stood up. I groaned again, clutching my back. I am tired, I said. The doctor said stress is bad for my heart. And this is very stressful. I walked toward the stairs. Where are you going? Veronica asked, standing up. We are not done discussing this. You have to call Sterling back. You have to tell him to unfreeze just 1 account. Just enough for the car. I turned on the stairs. I looked down at them. They looked small from up there. They looked desperate. I can't. Veronica, I said. It is out of my hands. It is the law. We just have to survive. We have to be a family. Families support each other in hard times, right? I didn't wait for an answer. I walked up the stairs, listening to the sound of Amber crying and Trey kicking the furniture. When I got to my room, I locked the door. I walked over to the window and looked out at the driveway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the estate. 30 days, I had told them. But it wasn't going to be 30 days. It was going to be forever. I took the black card out of my pocket and set it on the nightstand. Tonight they would eat whatever was in the pantry. Tonight they would realize that the golden faucet had been turned off. And tomorrow the real work would begin. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I felt lighter than I had in years. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. I was an architect, and I had just begun the demolition. The first wall had fallen, and the sound of the crash was music to my ears. The silence of a large house without servants is a heavy thing. It has a weight to it, a texture that rich people are not used to feeling. For 10 years, my wife Veronica had woken up to the smell of premium roast coffee prepared by Mrs. Higgins and the sound of breakfast being plated by Chef Antoine. She moved through life on a cushion of paid labor, never touching a broom, never scrubbing a dish, never worrying about how the dust disappeared from the mantel. That ended on Wednesday morning. I woke up early before the sun had fully risen over the Georgia pines. I felt a strange sense of energy, the kind I hadn't felt since I was a young architect supervising a site pour at dawn. I walked downstairs to the kitchen. Mrs. Higgins and Chef Antoine were there looking confused. I had called them in early. I handed them both envelopes. Thick envelopes. Inside was 3 months of severance pay in cash drawn from my private account. I am sorry, I told them, my voice filled with a feigned sadness. The bank fraud. The investigation. I can no longer pay you. You have been loyal, but I cannot ask you to work for free. Mrs. Higgins cried. She hugged me. She was a good woman who had seen how Veronica treated me. I think she knew. I think she saw the relief in my eyes. She took the money and she left. Antoine shook my hand and walked out the back door. By 8 o'clock, the house was empty. I sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of dry cereal and waited. Veronica came down at 9, wrapped in her silk robe, expecting her poached eggs and mimosa. She stopped in the doorway, looking at the empty stove. "Where is Antoine?" she asked, stifling a yawn. "And why is the coffee pot empty?" "Antoine is gone, Veronica," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Mrs. Higgins, too." "Gone where?" "To the market." "Gone for good," I said. "I fired them." Veronica dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a clatter. "You what?" she screamed. "You fired the staff." "Are you insane, Harold? Who is going to cook? Who is going to clean the toilets? Who is going to do the laundry?" "We are," I said calmly, turning a page. "As I explained yesterday, we are on an austerity budget. We cannot afford $6,000 a month in staff salaries when the bank has frozen our assets. It would be irresponsible." I watched the realization wash over her. It wasn't just shock. It was horror. The idea of manual labor was as foreign to her as quantum physics. "But I don't know how to cook," she stammered. "I haven't cooked a meal since before I met you." "It is like riding a bike," I said. "It will come back to you. There is a chicken in the freezer. I suggest you take it out now so it thaws by dinner." She looked at me with pure hatred, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. The logic of the fraud was a trap she couldn't escape without admitting she didn't care about our financial survival. Then came the laundry. Trey came down at noon wearing yesterday's clothes, looking rumpled and hungover. "Mom, where are my gym shorts?" he asked, opening the fridge and staring blankly at the ingredients. "Mrs. Higgins didn't leave my basket upstairs. Mrs. Higgins doesn't work here anymore," Veronica snapped. She was struggling to open a can of soup and had already broken a nail. "Ask Harold." Trey turned to me, his mouth open. "You fired the maid?" he asked. I pointed to the laundry room door. "The machine is simple, Trey," I said. "You put the clothes in, you add soap, you press start. I am sure a bright young man like you can figure it out." He looked at the washing machine like it was a spaceship. "But I have cashmere," he whined. "I have dry clean only shirts." "Then I suggest you wash them by hand in the sink," I said. "Dry cleaning is a luxury. We are in survival mode, son." The rest of the day was a study in chaos. I sat in my library monitoring the cameras, and I admit I felt a dark satisfaction. I watched Veronica burn the soup. I watched her scream when she splashed hot water on her blouse while trying to wash dishes. I watched Trey staring at a bottle of detergent, reading the instructions like he was deciphering hieroglyphics. But the real entertainment started when Amber came home. She had spent the day out probably trying to return clothes to get cash only to find out she didn't have the receipts. She walked in expecting dinner. She walked in expecting order. Instead, she found a smoke-filled kitchen and a boyfriend wearing shrunk pants. "What is that smell?" Amber asked, wrinkling her nose as she walked into the kitchen. "Your dinner," I said from the table where I was eating a piece of burnt toast. Veronica tried her best. Amber looked at the blackened chicken on the counter. She looked at Veronica, whose hair was frizzy from the steam and whose eyes were red from crying. "I am not eating that," Amber said, crossing her arms. "Let's order Uber Eats." Trey pulled out his phone. Then he remembered. "We can't," he muttered. "The cards are locked. The app won't work." Amber threw her purse on the table. "This is ridiculous. I am starving. Harold, you have to do something. This is abuse." I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. "The cable is gone too," I said. "I canceled the premium package this afternoon. And the country club membership. And the golf dues." Trey looked up, his eyes wide with panic. "You canceled the cable?" he asked. "What about the sports package?" "The playoffs are next week. We have the basic channels," I said. "You can watch the news. It is free." I walked out of the room, leaving them to their misery. I went to my study and turned on the monitors. The real show was about to begin. I switched the camera view to the guest bedroom where Trey and Amber were staying. They walked in 10 minutes later. Amber slammed the door. She turned on Trey like a viper. "Look at you," she hissed, poking him in the chest. "Look at you standing there in your shrunken pants. You are pathetic." "Babe, come on," Trey pleaded, holding up his hands. "It is just for a few weeks. The old man is trying to fix it." "Fix it!" She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "He isn't fixing anything. He is tightening the noose. Can't you see that? He is senile and he is cheap, and you are supposed to be the heir. You are supposed to be taking over." "I am trying," Trey said, sinking onto the bed. "But Mom said we have to play along. If we push him too hard, he might cut us out of the will." "The will," Amber screamed. "I don't care about the will, Trey. I care about right now. I care about the penthouse. We lose the deposit on Friday. Do you understand that? $5,000. Gone." She paced around the room, her eyes wild. "You promised me, Trey," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You promised me a lifestyle. You said your stepdad was a cash cow. Well, the cow has stopped giving milk. So what are you going to do about it? What do you want me to do?" Trey asked, his voice trembling. "I can't force him to sign checks." "You are a man, aren't you?" Amber sneered. "Or are you just a mama's boy who waits for his allowance? If you can't get money from him, you need to find another way." She looked around the room. Her eyes landed on the dresser where Trey kept his collection of silver cufflinks and the vintage Rolex I had given him for his 21st birthday, a watch he never wore because he said it was old people jewelry. "We have assets," she whispered. "This house is full of stuff, expensive stuff. He doesn't even know what he has. He is half blind, Trey. He won't notice if a few things go missing." Trey looked at her shocked. "You want me to steal?" he asked. "From Harold." "It is not stealing," she said, sitting down next to him and putting her hand on his knee. "It is an advance on your inheritance. It is all going to be yours anyway, right? We just need cash to bridge the gap, just until the bank investigation is over." Trey hesitated. He looked at the door. He looked at the Rolex. "I don't know, Amber. If he finds out, he won't find out," she said, kissing his neck. "He is confused. He thinks the bank is defrauding him. If things go missing, he will just blame the maid you fired, or he will forget he even had them." I watched Trey's face. I saw the struggle, the weak moral compass spinning wildly before settling on greed. He wanted to please her. He wanted to be the big man. He was terrified of losing her. "Okay," he whispered. "Just a few things. Just to cover the deposit." "Good boy," she purred. "Start tonight. The old man goes to sleep at 9. The library is full of silver." I sat back in my chair in the dark study. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding with adrenaline. They had crossed the line. Laziness I could handle. Entitlement I expected. But theft. Theft was a crime. And crimes leave evidence. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. I turned off the monitor. I went to the library. I had a collection of antique silver tea sets, Georgian era, worth about $5,000 a set. I moved one of them to the side table right near the door. I made it easy. I made it tempting. Then I went upstairs to my room. I lay in bed, but I didn't sleep. I kept my iPad under the covers linked to the camera feed. At 2 in the morning, the door to the library creaked open. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Trey crept in. He was wearing a hoodie pulled up over his head like a common burglar. He moved silently, avoiding the squeaky floorboards he had grown up walking on. He saw the silver tea set. He froze. He listened. The house was silent. He reached out and grabbed the teapot, then the sugar bowl, then the creamer. He stuffed them into a gym bag. I watched him on the screen. The night vision camera turned his eyes into glowing white orbs. He looked like a rat scurrying in the pantry. He didn't just take the tea set. He took a silver letter opener from my desk. He took a crystal paperweight. He was greedy, just like his mother. He slipped out of the room, closing the door softly. I watched him go. I saved the video clip. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to a thumb drive. I had him. He wasn't just my stepson anymore. He was a thief. And in the morning, I wasn't going to call the police. That would be too easy. I was going to let him sell it. I was going to let him pawn my history for pennies. Because when you pawn something, you sign a receipt. You leave a thumbprint. You create a paper trail that leads straight to a jail cell. I put the iPad away. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now I just had to wait for the snap. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It brought clarity. I woke up at 6 feeling the familiar ache in my joints that comes with rain or trouble, and today I knew it was trouble. I dressed in my charcoal suit, the one I used to wear to board meetings when I had to fire a contractor for cutting corners. I walked down the hallway, my cane tapping a rhythmic warning on the floorboards until I reached the library. The door was closed just as I had left it, but the air inside felt disturbed. An architect knows when a space has been violated. The flow is wrong. The shadows are in the wrong places. I walked straight to the mahogany display case behind my desk. It was a piece I had designed myself with tempered glass and a humidity control system meant to protect the things I loved. Inside, on velvet pillows, sat the timeline of my success. There was the Patek Philippe Calatrava I bought when I landed the Skyline contract in '92, the Vacheron Constantin from the year I made my first million, and the vintage Rolex Submariner, the one Bernice, my first wife, gave me on our 20th anniversary. The case was unlocked. The glass was smudged with finger oils, and the pillows were empty. They were gone. 50 years of history. $300,000 in horology. All vanished into the gym bag of a boy who could not tell time unless it was on a smartphone. I did not scream. I did not call Veronica. I stood there and felt a cold calm settle over me like a blanket of snow. I walked to my desk and opened the laptop. I pulled up the footage from 3 a.m. There he was, Trey, wearing a hoodie, his face illuminated by the glow of his flashlight. He didn't just take the silver tea set, he went for the big score. I watched him pry the lock of the case with the letter opener. I watched him shove the watches into his pockets, carelessly scratching the crystal faces against each other. He looked nervous, but he also looked entitled. He looked like a man harvesting a crop he did not plant. I closed the laptop. I had seen enough. I could have called the police right then. I could have had Officer Miller drag him out in cuffs before breakfast. But that would have been a tactical error. The police would arrest him, yes, but Veronica would bail him out. She would cry. She would beg. She would claim it was a misunderstanding or an addiction. The courts are lenient on first-time offenders, especially ones with sad mothers. Number 1, I needed something stronger than an arrest. I needed leverage. I needed a chain around his neck that I could tighten whenever I pleased. I went to the garage. I bypassed the Jaguar and took the old sedan, the one we kept for the gardener. It was nondescript, invisible. I drove out of the gated community and headed south toward the part of Atlanta that does not appear in tourist brochures. The pawn shop was located on a street where the buildings had bars on the windows and the air smelled of exhaust and fried food. It was called Silas's Exchange. The sign was faded, but the door was reinforced steel. I parked around the corner and walked in. The bell above the door chimed a cheerful sound that clashed with the gloom inside. The shop was a graveyard of broken dreams. Guitars hanging from the ceiling, power tools stacked on shelves, wedding rings in a glass counter waiting for marriages that had failed to reclaim them. Silas was behind the counter. He was a man my age with skin the color of deep mahogany and hands that were scarred from years of handling other people's problems. We had grown up in the same neighborhood before I went to college and he went to the streets. We had taken different paths, but we respected the road the other had traveled. Harold Banks. Silas said, his voice rough like gravel. I haven't seen you down here since you were looking for that stolen transit level in '85. I walked to the counter leaning on my cane. Hello, Silas. I am looking for something a little more personal today. Silas looked at me. He looked at my suit. He looked at the cane. You didn't come here to buy a toaster, Harold. What is it? A young man came in here this morning, I said. Early. Maybe as soon as you opened. Light-skinned. Nervous. Driving a Range Rover he can't afford. Silas nodded slowly. He reached under the counter and pulled out a ledger. He brought in some high-end pieces, Silas said. Too high-end for a kid who looked like he had never worked a day in his life. Patek, Vacheron, Rolex. He said they were an inheritance. Said his grandfather died and left them to him. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He killed me off to sell my watches. I am not dead yet, Silas, I said. Silas sighed. He closed the ledger. I figured as much, Harold. The kid was shaking. He wanted cash. Fast. He took 20 grand for the lot. A fraction of what they are worth, but he didn't care. He just wanted the money. 20 grand. He sold $300,000 worth of watches for 20 grand. Enough to pay the deposit on the penthouse and have a wild weekend. The stupidity was almost impressive. I need them back, Silas, I said. Silas looked at me. You know the rules, Harold. I have to hold them for 30 days before I can sell them. Police hold. Unless the owner reclaims them, I said. I reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out a thick envelope. Inside was $25,000 in cash. I placed it on the counter. 20 for the buyback, I said. 5 for your trouble and your discretion. Silas looked at the money. He didn't touch it yet. You want me to wipe the ticket, he asked. Make it look like he was never here. No, I said, my voice hard. That is exactly what I do not want. I leaned closer. I want the ticket, Silas. The original pawn ticket. The one he signed. The one with his right thumbprint in ink on the bottom line. Silas raised an eyebrow. That is a legal document, Harold. That is evidence of receiving stolen property. If you have that, you own him. Exactly, I said. I want the watches back in my pocket, but I want the paper trail to stay alive. I want proof that he sold my property. I want his fingerprint. Silas smiled a slow, knowing smile. He understood. He knew about wayward sons and ungrateful families. He reached into the file drawer. He pulled out a yellow slip of paper. On the bottom line was a scrawled signature, Trey Robinson, and a clear black thumbprint. The ink was still fresh. He handed me the paper. Then he went to the safe and brought out the velvet pouch. He poured the watches onto the counter. They were safe. Scratched, but safe. I picked up the Rolex. I wound it. The second hand started to sweep. Time was moving again. Thank you, Silas, I said, sliding the money toward him. You be careful, Harold, Silas said, counting the bills. A boy who steals from his father is a boy who has forgotten who feeds him. And when the food runs out, the dog bites. He is already bitten, I said, putting the pawn ticket into my wallet right next to the black debit card. Now I am just removing his teeth. I drove home with the watches hidden in the spare tire well of the trunk. I couldn't put them back in the case. Not yet. When I walked into the house, it was late afternoon. The atmosphere had changed. The tension from yesterday was gone, replaced by a strange, giddy energy. Veronica was in the kitchen humming as she burnt another pot of rice. Amber was on the patio talking loudly on her phone, and Trey was in the living room watching the news on the basic cable channel I had left him. He looked different. He was wearing new sneakers. He had a new watch on his wrist, a gaudy gold thing that looked cheap. He looked relaxed. The desperation was gone. He had the cash. He had paid the deposit. He thought he was safe. I walked into the room and let out a long, heavy sigh. I slumped into my chair. Harold, Veronica called out, "You are back. Where did you go with that old car?" "I just went for a drive," I said, my voice sounding hollow. I needed to think. I needed to look at my things, to remember better times. I looked at Trey. He glanced at me, then looked away, focusing on the TV. "What is wrong?" Harold, Trey asked casually. "You look sadder than usual." I rubbed my eyes. "I went to the library this morning, Trey," I said. "I wanted to wind my watches. The collection. You know how much I love those watches." Trey stiffened. I saw his hand clench on the remote. "Yeah," he he said, his voice tight. Nice watches. They are gone, I whispered. The room went silent. Veronica stopped humming in the kitchen and walked to the doorway. What do you mean gone, she asked. The case is empty, I said. My Patek, my Vacheron, the Rolex Bernice gave me, all of them. Stolen. Oh my God, Veronica gasped. We have to call the police. It must have been the maid. Mrs. Higgins. You fired her and she came back for revenge. I knew she had shifty eyes. I watched Trey. He was sweating now. A bead of perspiration rolled down his temple. He was waiting to see if I bought the lie. I don't know, I said, shaking my head. The locks weren't broken. The alarm didn't go off. It is almost as if someone had a key, or someone who lived here took them. Trey stood up. He forced a laugh. It sounded brittle. Come on, Harold. Don't look at us. Why would we take your old watches? Mom is right. It was probably the staff. Or maybe you misplaced them. You know. Your memory hasn't been great lately. He walked over and patted my shoulder. His hand felt hot. Don't worry, old man, he said condescendingly. They are just things. You still have us. We are your family. We are here for you. I looked up at him. I looked into the eyes of the boy I had put through private school, the boy I had taught to drive, the boy who had just pawned my memories for a weekend of partying. I smiled. It was a sad, tired smile on the surface, but underneath it was the smile of a predator who has just locked the cage. Thank you, Trey, I said, patting his hand which was resting on my shoulder. You are right. Family is everything. I paused. I let the silence stretch until he started to pull his hand away. But you know what the police told me once, I said softly. What Trey asked. Trey. I looked him dead in the eye. They said that in 90% of theft cases, the thief is usually the person standing closest to you, the one who knows where you hide the key, the one who smiles to your face while his pockets are heavy with your gold. Trey flinched. He pulled his hand back as if I had burned him. That is a dark way to think, Harold, he stammered. It is a realistic way, son, I said. I stood up, leaning on my cane. I am going to take a nap, I said. I am very tired. The loss. It breaks my heart. But the truth always comes out, Trey. Just like oil in water. It always rises to the top. I walked past him. I felt him staring at my back. He was terrified. He was wondering if I knew. He was wondering if I was bluffing. But he had the cash. He felt safe. He told himself I was just a senile old man rambling about police statistics. He didn't know that inside my jacket pocket, resting against my heart, was a yellow slip of paper with his name and his thumbprint. He didn't know that he hadn't just sold a watch. He had sold his freedom. And I was holding the receipt. Vanity is the most expensive hobby a person can have, and my wife Veronica was a collector of the rarest kind. Despite the fact that I had cut off the household funds, fired the staff, and canceled the credit cards, she simply could not abide the idea of canceling her 42nd birthday party. To her, social standing was like oxygen, and admitting that we were having financial difficulties was equivalent to suffocation. So she did what I knew she would do. She dipped into the secret reserves. I had known for years that she was skimming from the grocery budget, paddling the contractor bills for the pool maintenance, and stashing away cash in a safety deposit box that she thought I didn't know about. I estimated she had about $50,000 hidden away. It was her escape fund, her rainy day money. And because her vanity was stronger than her survival instinct, she decided to blow nearly half of it on a single night just to prove to the neighbors that the Banks family was still on top of the world. The preparations began on Friday morning. Without Mrs. Higgins or Chef Antoine, Veronica had to hire a high-end catering company. I watched from the landing as she paid the event planner with a thick envelope of cash. It was satisfying to see her depleting her own safety net to feed a room full of people who didn't actually like her. She was buying an illusion, and she was paying top dollar for it. I decided to play my part in this theater of the absurd. If she wanted to present the image of a thriving dynasty, I would present the image of its crumbling patriarch. I spent the day in my room resting. When it was time to dress for the party, I didn't put on a tuxedo. I put on a slightly oversized suit that made me look shrunken and frail. I didn't comb my hair perfectly, leaving a few strands out of place. I grabbed my cane, the one with the heavy brass handle, and practiced a shuffle that suggested my knees were giving out. The guests arrived at 7, the house filled with the sound of clinking glasses and the murmur of polite gossip. These were the vultures of Atlanta society. They came to drink my scotch, eat my shrimp, and whisper about who was gaining weight and who was losing money. Veronica was in her element. She wore a gold sequined gown that hugged her curves, and she moved through the room with a manic energy, laughing too loudly, pouring wine with a heavy hand, trying desperately to drown out the silence of the empty bank accounts. I made my entrance at 7:30. I walked down the grand staircase, slowly gripping the banister with a trembling hand. The conversation in the foyer died down as they looked up at me. I saw the pity in their eyes. There goes Harold Banks, they were thinking, the lion in winter, the architect who is losing his blueprint. Veronica rushed to my side, her smile tight and frantic. "Harold, darling," she cooed, linking her arm through mine. "I am so glad you felt well enough to come down. Everyone was asking about you." I patted her hand weakly. "I wouldn't miss your birthday, my dear, even if my heart is heavy." She steered me toward a chair in the corner, away from the center of the room. She wanted me visible enough to prove I was alive, but distant enough that I wouldn't ruin the vibe with my mortality. "Sit here, Harold," she whispered. "I will bring you some water. Don't tire yourself out talking to people." I sat. I watched. I waited. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of the room. I saw Trey standing by the bar wearing a suit that was too tight and the gold watch he had bought with the money from my stolen collection. He was laughing with a group of young men, bragging about the new Porsche he claimed was on back order. He looked confident, he looked rich. And then there was Amber. She was wearing a red dress that was a little too short and a little too bright. She was holding a martini glass that was clearly not her first. She was surrounded by a gaggle of her friends' young women who looked at this house with hungry eyes. Amber was holding court, enjoying the envy of her peers. I adjusted the hearing aid I was wearing. I don't actually need a hearing aid, my hearing is excellent. But the device I was wearing wasn't for amplification. It was a Bluetooth receiver linked to the high-gain microphone on my phone, which was sitting in my breast pocket recording everything. I leaned back and closed my eyes, pretending to doze off. Amber's voice drifted over the crowd, loud and slurred. "Oh, don't worry about the old man," she was saying, gesturing toward me with her olive. "He looks terrible, doesn't he? It is sad, really." One of her friends whispered something I couldn't catch, but Amber's reply was crystal clear. "No, it won't be long," she giggled, taking a large sip of her drink. "The doctors say his heart is basically tissue paper. Any day now. And honestly, it is for the best. He is miserable. We are just waiting for nature to take its course." I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. She was talking about my death like it was a weather forecast. But what about the money, her friend asked. "Is it complicated?" Amber laughed, a sound that was sharp and ugly. "Honey, it is all arranged. Trey is the stepson, but Veronica has power of attorney. Once he kicks the bucket, we get everything. The house, the patents, the offshore accounts. We are going to be millionaires, multimillionaires. We are looking at a penthouse downtown. This place is too big anyway. We are going to sell it and travel. We are going to be millionaires." There it was, the confession, the motive, the utter lack of humanity. She wasn't marrying Trey for love. She was marrying a funeral. I reached into my pocket and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I named it Amber's Toast. I opened my eyes. I gripped my cane. It was time. I stood up. It took effort, not because I was weak, but because the rage was making my legs heavy. I tapped my glass with a spoon. The sharp ring cut through the noise of the party. Ding, ding, ding. The room went quiet. Faces turned toward me. Veronica looked panic-stricken. She started walking toward me, waving her hands slightly as if to tell me to sit down. "Harold, no," she mouthed. "You don't have to speak." But I did have to speak. I cleared my throat. The microphone I had asked the DJ to set up earlier was handed to me. I held it with a shaking hand. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice raspy but projecting to the back of the room. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the people eating my food and drinking my wine. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my beautiful wife, Veronica." Applause. Polite and restrained. Veronica smiled nervously, standing halfway across the room, frozen. "I know I haven't been myself lately," I continued, leaning on the cane. "Age has a way of humbling a man. It makes you think about what is important. It makes you think about the future. And it makes you think about the people who take care of you." I looked directly at Amber. She was freezing mid-sip, her eyes wide. I looked at Trey, who was looking for an exit. I looked at Veronica. "My wife has been a saint," I said. "She has nursed me. She has handled the burdens of this house when I was too weak to carry them. And seeing her devotion, seeing the love in this room, it has made me realize something." I paused. The silence was absolute. You could hear a pin drop on the marble floor. It has made me realize that legacy isn't about what you keep. It is about what you give away. Veronica's smile faltered. Her brow furrowed. I have spent my life building wealth. I said, my voice gaining strength, shedding the tremor. I built skyscrapers. I built a fortune. But wealth can be a burden. It can be a poison that rots a family from the inside out if they are not careful. I took a deep breath. So tonight, in honor of my wife and her selfless spirit, I am happy to make an announcement. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the new trust agreement. This morning, I finalized the paperwork for the Harold Banks Foundation. Veronica took a step forward. Her face was losing color rapidly. Upon my passing, I continued, my voice booming, now filling the cavernous room. 90% of my entire estate, including this house, my liquid assets, and my future royalties, will be liquidated and donated to charities supporting inner-city architecture programs and homeless shelters. The gasp that went through the room was audible. It was a physical shockwave. 90%. I saw Amber drop her martini glass. It shattered on the floor, olive rolling away into the silence. I saw Trey choke on his drink, coughing violently. I saw Veronica turn the color of ash. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. I smiled, a benevolent grandfatherly smile. I know, I said, looking at my wife. It is a bold step, but I knew you would support it, Veronica. You always told me that we had too much, that we should live simpler lives, that money wasn't everything. Well, my dear, I listened to you. I raised my glass of water. To charity I toasted, and to my family who will now have the opportunity to build their own fortunes without the heavy burden of mine. I drank. Nobody else drank. The silence stretched on, painful and excruciating. The guests looked at Veronica, waiting for her reaction. Was she the saint he described, or was she the woman who just lost 90% of her lottery winnings? She couldn't scream. She couldn't yell. She was in public. She was trapped in the persona she had created. She forced a smile. It was the most grotesque expression I had ever seen. It was a rictus of pure agony. That is, wonderful, Harold, she squeaked. Just wonderful. I handed the microphone back to the DJ. Please enjoy the party, I said. It cost a fortune after all. I turned and shuffled back to my chair, sitting down with a satisfied sigh. The party didn't last much longer after that. The air had been sucked out of the room. The guests whispered furiously. They knew. They smelled the blood in the water. They looked at Amber picking up broken glass. They looked at Trey loosening his tie in a panic. They looked at Veronica staring into the middle distance as her retirement plan evaporated. I sat there and watched them spiral. Amber came over to me first. She knelt down beside my chair, smelling of gin and desperation. You are joking, right? She whispered, her voice trembling. Harold, tell me you are joking. 90%. That is insane. You can't do that to Trey. He is your son. Stepson, I corrected gently. And I am not joking, Amber. I thought you would be happy. You said earlier that money wasn't important as long as we had each other. She stood up, her eyes burning with hatred. She looked at me, and for a second I thought she might hit me. You old bastard, she hissed. I smiled. Careful, Amber, I whispered, tapping my hearing aid. The volume is turned up very high tonight. She blanched. She realized then that I had heard her. She realized the trap had snapped shut. She turned and ran toward the bathroom. I watched her go. The first domino had fallen. The second was wobbling. I looked at Veronica across the room. She was drinking straight from the bottle of wine now. Happy birthday, my love, I thought. Welcome to the rest of your life. The days following my birthday announcement were filled with a silence so thick you could choke on it. The house felt like a funeral parlor where the corpse was still walking around making coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal. Veronica had retreated into a shell of shock, her eyes permanently swollen from crying over the loss of her imaginary fortune. Trey and Amber stalked the hallways like hungry ghosts, whispering in corners and glaring at me whenever I entered a room. They were desperate, and as any architect knows, desperation is the most volatile force in nature. It pushes people to make structural errors they would never make if they were standing on solid ground. I knew I had them on the ropes. I had cut their spending. I had threatened their inheritance. I had exposed their greed. But I wasn't done. I needed to drain the last reservoir of their resilience. I knew Veronica had a secret stash. Over 10 years she had siphoned money from the household accounts, little by little. A contractor bill padded here, a grocery run inflated there, I estimated she had close to $200,000 hidden away in cash and jewelry. It was her escape hatch, her war chest, and I intended to empty it. To do that, I needed to bait a hook so shiny and so promising that their greed would override their survival instinct. I set the stage on a Tuesday morning. I knew Trey was lurking in the hallway outside my library. He had been trying to listen in on my calls, hoping to find a loophole in the trust, so I gave him one. I left the library door cracked open just an inch. I picked up my phone and dialed the automated weather service, but I spoke as if I were talking to my oldest friend and business partner. "Listen to me, George," I said, my voice low but carrying perfectly into the hall. "I don't care about the risk. If the return is 500% in 3 months, I am in. Yes, I understand it is a private equity bridge loan, high yield, short term." I paused, listening to the robotic voice tell me the barometric pressure. I laughed, a rich, confident sound. "George, if I put in 200,000 today, it turns into $1 million by Christmas. That solves everything. I can leave the trust alone and still have plenty for personal use. Yes. Keep it off the books. I don't want the lawyers involved. Just a straight cash buy-in." I hung up. I waited. I heard footsteps retreating fast. Trey was running to tell the others. The seed was planted. Now I just had to wait for the rain. It didn't take long. That evening I was sitting on the patio watching the sunset. The air was cooling, but I had a blanket over my legs, playing the part of the frail old man. Trey walked out. He was holding 2 beers. He offered me one. I took it. "Thank you, son." He sat down next to me. He looked nervous. He kept tapping his foot. "Harold," he started. "I couldn't help but overhear you earlier. In the library." I stiffened. I feigned annoyance. "You were eavesdropping, Trey." "I was just walking by," he said quickly. "But I heard you talking to George. About an investment, a bridge loan." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "That is private business, Trey. It is a high-level deal, very complicated, very exclusive." "But 500%, Trey said, his eyes widening. "That is huge, Harold. That is life-changing money." "It is," I admitted. "It is a loop in the market, a real estate development in Dubai that needs liquidity overnight. They pay a premium for speed. But the buy-in is steep. And frankly, with the bank freeze, I don't have the liquidity. I missed the window." I took a sip of beer and shook my head sadly. "It is a shame, really. If I could have gotten into this deal, I could have doubled the family stipend. I could have bought that penthouse you kids wanted. I could have secured Veronica's future regardless of the charity clause. But my hands are tied." I watched him process this. I watched the gears turn. He wasn't thinking about me. He was thinking about the penthouse. He was thinking about the $1 million. He stood up. "What is the buy-in?" he asked. 200,000, I said. "Cash, unmarked. It has to be wired through a private broker by tomorrow noon." He nodded. He didn't say anything else. He just walked back inside. I knew where he was going. He was going to the war room. I turned on the camera feed on my phone. They were in the master bedroom. Veronica was sitting on the bed, weeping softly. Amber was pacing. Trey was talking fast, waving his hands. "Mom, listen to me," Trey was saying. "He said it himself. 500%. If we give him the money, he turns 200 grand into $1 million. That bypasses the trust, Mom. That is cash. That is ours." "But it is all I have," Veronica sobbed. "It took me 10 years to save that money. It is my safety net, Trey. If I give it to him and he loses it, he won't lose it." Amber cut in. "He is Harold Banks. He is a genius with money. You heard him at the party. He built this empire. He knows what he is doing, and he wants to do it. He wants to leave us something. He feels guilty about the charity thing." "But why does he need cash?" Veronica asked, wiping her eyes. "Because his accounts are frozen," Amber explained slowly, as if talking to a child. "The fraud investigation, remember. He can't move his own money. He needs liquidity. Mom, this is the only way. If we don't do this, we are stuck with the stipend. We are stuck with 10%. Do you want to live on a budget for the rest of your life? Do you want to clean toilets forever?" Veronica shuddered. The memory of the last few days of housework was fresh and terrifying. 200,000, she whispered. "I have 50, Trey said. From some savings I have." He meant the watch money. "And I can get 50, Amber lied. I can borrow it from my dad." She meant she would take a cash advance on her credit cards or visit a loan shark. "That leaves 100, Mom," Trey said. "You have that in the safety deposit box." "I know you do." Veronica looked at her son. She looked at the future. She saw a choice between a gamble and a guarantee of mediocrity. Greed is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs the fear of risk. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we do it. But we have to make sure the payout comes to us." "We will," Amber said, smiling that shark-like smile. "We will make him sign a side letter, a promissory note." I turned off the camera. I smiled. They were going to give me their own stolen money to invest in a fantasy. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was electric. They were being nice to me, extremely nice. Veronica made me oatmeal without burning it. Amber brought me a newspaper. Trey actually held the door open for me. At 10 o'clock, they marched into my library. It was a delegation. Harold, Veronica started. "We need to talk." I looked up from my book. "About what, my dear?" "About the investment," Trey said, stepping forward. "The Dubai deal." I frowned. "I told you, Trey. I can't do it. My accounts are frozen." "We know," Veronica said. "But ours aren't. Or at least, my cash isn't." She placed a heavy leather satchel on my desk. It made a solid thud. "What is this?" I asked. "It is $200,000, Veronica said, her voice trembling slightly. "It is family money. Money I saved. Money the kids scraped together." I looked at the bag. Then I looked at them. "You want to invest?" I asked. "We want to help the family," Amber said, smooth as silk. "We believe in you, Harold. We know you can turn this into something big. For all of us." I opened the bag. It was full of stacks of $100 bills. Some were crisp and new. Some were old and smelled of perfume, likely from Veronica's hiding spot. "This is a risk," I warned them. "High reward means high risk." "We trust you," Harold, Trey said. "You are the architect. Build us a future." I looked at the money. It was justice in physical form. This was money Veronica had siphoned from my earnings. This was money Trey had gotten from selling my watches. This was money Amber had borrowed against a future she would never have. I closed the bag. "All right," I said. "If you are sure." "We are sure," Veronica said. "I will wire this today," I said. "The broker is waiting. In 3 months we should see the return." "And the profit?" Amber asked. I pulled out a piece of paper. I wrote a quick note. "I, Harold Banks, acknowledge receipt of $200,000 for investment purposes. Proceeds to be distributed to the family." I signed it. I handed it to Veronica. "There," I said. "A guarantee." She clutched the paper like it was a holy relic. "Thank you, Harold," she said. "Thank you." They left the room walking on air. They thought they had just bought a lottery ticket with a winning number. I waited until they were gone. I picked up the bag. It was heavy. I didn't call a broker in Dubai. I didn't call George. I called Mr. Sterling at the bank. "I am coming in to make a deposit," I told him. $200,000 cash. Put it in my personal savings, the one they can't touch. I drove to the bank an hour later. I handed the bag to the teller. As she counted it, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I wasn't stealing from them. I was recovering my losses. This money would cover the $50,000 they spent on the credit cards. It would cover the cost of the stolen watches. It would cover the severance pay for the staff. I was balancing the books. And the best part was they had handed it to me with a smile. When I got home that evening, they were celebrating. They had opened a bottle of champagne. To the future, Trey toasted, raising his glass. To the future, I replied, raising my glass of water. I looked at them. They were broke. Completely and utterly broke. They had emptied their savings. They had borrowed money. And they had given it all to the man they were trying to kill. The irony was delicious. Harold, Amber said, a little tipsy, "When the money comes in, can we look at the penthouse again?" I smiled. "Amber," I said, "when this pays out, you can look at whatever you want." I didn't tell her that the only thing she would be looking at was an eviction notice. I went to bed early that night. I put the receipt from the bank in my safe. They thought they had planted a seed of wealth, but they had just buried themselves. And I was the one holding the shovel. Greed is a hungry beast, and once you feed it, it only demands more. After I took their $200,000 under the guise of the investment opportunity, I saw a change in the atmosphere of my house. The desperation that had plagued Veronica and Trey for weeks had vanished, replaced by a manic kind of anticipation. They walked with a bounce in their steps. They smiled at me with teeth that looked too white and too sharp. They believed they had bought their future. They believed the payout was coming in 3 months. But 3 months is a long time for a woman like Veronica to wait, especially when she has already spent the money in her mind. I noticed the change in the routine immediately. For weeks, Veronica had been careful with the dosage of the foxglove in my tea. Just enough to make my hands shake. Just enough to make my heart flutter and send me to bed early. She needed me weak, but she needed me alive to sign the investment papers. Now that the papers were signed and the money was supposedly wired to Dubai, she didn't need me anymore. I was no longer a resource. I was a loose end. It was Wednesday evening, 2 days after they handed over the cash. I was sitting in the library reviewing the camera feeds when I saw Veronica in the kitchen. She was preparing my evening chamomile. Usually she was quick about it. This time she lingered. I zoomed in. She wasn't using the small dropper she kept hidden in the spice rack anymore. She was pouring from a small vial directly into the steaming cup. It wasn't a few drops. It was a stream. My heart went cold. That wasn't a sedative. That was an execution. She stirred it vigorously, her face a mask of grim determination. She didn't look like a wife. She looked like a doctor administering a final mercy to a terminal patient. Except I wasn't terminal. I was just inconvenient. I watched her walk toward the library. I had seconds to act. I couldn't drink that tea. The activated charcoal pills I had been taking wouldn't be enough to counteract that dosage. If I drank that, I wouldn't just be faking a heart attack, I would be dead on the floor before the ambulance arrived. I unlocked the library door and sat back in my chair picking up a book. My hands were trembling, and for once I didn't have to act. The reality of my wife trying to murder me was a cold shock to the system, no matter how prepared I thought I was. "Knock, knock," she said, pushing the door open. Her voice was sweet, cloying like syrup that has gone bad. "I brought your tea, Harold. You looked so tired at dinner." She placed the cup on the coaster. The steam rose, carrying the faint scent of bitter almonds masked by the heavy floral smell of the chamomile. "Thank you, Veronica," I said, not looking up. "You are too good to me." "I just want you to be comfortable," she said, standing behind my chair and massaging my shoulders. Her hands were strong. Too strong. "Drink it while it is hot, darling. It will help your heart." I knew she wouldn't leave until I drank it. She wanted to witness the fall. I lifted the cup. My hand shook violently, spilling a little of the hot liquid onto my wrist. I hissed in pain. "Careful," she said, steadying my hand. "Here, let me help." I needed a distraction. I needed 3 seconds. "Veronica," I said, looking at the window. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" she asked, looking toward the glass. "The alarm," I said. "The perimeter sensor. I think someone is in the garden." She turned her head sharply toward the window. In that split second, I poured the entire cup into the large potted ficus plant next to my desk. The soil drank it up instantly. I brought the empty cup back to my lips and made a loud swallowing sound. "Ah," I said, wiping my mouth. "That was bitter tonight." "It is a new blend," she said, turning back to me, her eyes scanning the garden. "I don't see anyone, Harold. You are imagining things again." Maybe I said, leaning back and closing my eyes. "Just my mind playing tricks." I waited. She stood there watching me like a hawk watching a field mouse. She was waiting for the gasp. She was waiting for the clutch of the chest. I decided not to disappoint her. I counted to 10 in my head. 1, 2, 3. I let the book slip from my fingers. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Harold," she asked, stepping closer. I let out a low groan. I grabbed my left arm, digging my fingers into the fabric of my cardigan. I squeezed my eyes shut and grimaced. My chest. I gasped. "Veronica." My chest. "It feels like an elephant." She didn't run to help me. She didn't call 911. She just stood there and watched. "Is it bad?" she asked, her voice devoid of panic. "Does it hurt?" I slipped out of the chair and fell to the floor. I made sure to knock over the lamp on the way down, creating a crash that would bring the others running. I writhed on the Persian rug, gasping for air, my eyes rolling back. "Help me," I whispered, reaching a hand out to her. "Please." She looked down at my hand. She didn't take it. She took a step back. "It is okay, Harold," she said softly. "Just let go. It is time to rest." The door burst open. Trey and Amber ran in. They saw me on the floor. They saw the overturned lamp. "Mom, what happened?" Trey yelled, freezing in the doorway. "He collapsed," Veronica said, acting now, putting her hand to her mouth. "He just drank his tea and collapsed." "Oh God. Trey, call an ambulance. I think this is it." Trey fumbled for his phone. Amber stood there staring at me with a look of morbid curiosity. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. She was wondering if the will was in the safe. I kept up the act. I let my breathing become shallow. I let my body go limp. The next 20 minutes were a blur of chaos. The paramedics arrived. They were professionals. They pushed Veronica aside as she tried to give them a sob story about my weak heart. They loaded me onto the stretcher. As they wheeled me out, I saw the three of them standing on the porch. Veronica was crying into a handkerchief. Trey had his arm around her. Amber was texting. They looked like a grieving family. They looked like winners. But the moment the ambulance doors closed, the performance ended. I sat up on the stretcher. "Sir, you need to lie down," the paramedic said, startled. "Your heart rate is—" "My heart rate is fine, son," I said, brushing the hair out of my eyes. "I am Harold Banks. Take me to Mount Sinai. Dr. Evans is expecting me. And call Arthur Steinberg. Tell him the package is en route." The paramedic looked at me confused, but he followed orders. When we arrived at the hospital, Dr. Evans was waiting in the emergency bay. He is a good man, a friend from the golf club who knew exactly what was happening. He whisked me into a private room in the cardiac wing. Steinberg was already there, sitting in the corner with his briefcase. "How was the performance?" Steinberg asked as I swung my legs off the gurney. "Oscar-worthy," I said, accepting a glass of water. Veronica upped the dose, Arthur. She poured enough poison in that cup to kill a horse. If I hadn't dumped it in the plant, I would be in the morgue right now. "We have the toxicology report from the tea residue on your cup," Steinberg said. "We managed to swipe it before the ambulance left. It confirms digitalis. High concentration. That is attempted murder, Harold. We can arrest her tonight." "Not yet," I said, taking a deep breath. "Not until they play their final card." Dr. Evans stepped forward. "I have marked your chart as critical condition, Harold. Strict isolation. No visitors, no family. I told the nurse to tell your wife that you are in a coma and the next 24 hours are decisive." "Good," I said. "That will give them hope, and hope makes people stupid." Steinberg handed me my iPad. I had connected it to the secure server at the house. "Now we wait," I said. I lay back in the hospital bed watching the screen. It was like watching a reality show where the contestants are fighting for a prize that doesn't exist. Back at the house, the mood had shifted from somber to celebratory. Veronica, Trey, and Amber were in the living room. Veronica poured herself a large glass of wine. "Did you hear the doctor?" Trey asked, pacing the room. "He said coma. He said decisive." "That means he is gone," Veronica said, taking a long sip. "He won't wake up from this. The dose was lethal. I made sure of it." "So what do we do now?" Amber asked. "We find the will," Veronica said, standing up. "We need to know where we stand. If he didn't sign the power of attorney, we need the physical will. We need to make sure that charity clause he talked about at the party isn't real." They moved as a pack toward the library, the room where I had almost died an hour ago. I watched on the screen as they entered. Veronica went straight for the painting of the Atlanta skyline behind my desk. She knew there was a wall safe behind it. I had let her see me open it once years ago. She thought she was clever. She pulled the painting down. The steel safe gleamed in the dim light. "Do you have the combination?" Trey asked. "Of course I do," Veronica scoffed. "It is his birthday. He is so predictable." She spun the dial, left to right to left, click. The handle turned. My heart beat faster in the hospital room. This was the moment, the payoff. Veronica pulled the heavy door open. Amber crowded in behind her. "Let me see. Is there cash?" "Are there diamonds?" Veronica reached inside. Her hand groped around in the dark metal box. She froze. "What is it?" Trey asked. "What is in there?" Veronica pulled her hand out. It was empty. She looked inside. She turned on the flashlight of her phone and shone it into the safe. It was empty. Dust. Just dust and a single paper clip. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. Where is it? Where are the papers? Where is the cash?" She started pulling the drawers out, throwing them on the floor. "Nothing. He moved it," she screamed, throwing the empty drawer across the room. "The old bastard moved it. He knew. He knew we would look." Amber grabbed Veronica's arm. "What do you mean he knew? Is he playing us?" "He is senile," Veronica yelled, pushing her away. "He probably forgot where he put it. Or maybe the lawyer has it." Steinberg looked at me in the hospital room and smiled. "She is panic-stricken," Steinberg said. "She thinks the money is just misplaced," I said. "She doesn't realize it is gone." Back on the screen, Trey was kicking the desk. "We gave him $200,000, he shouted. "If he dies and we can't find the will and we can't find the investment papers, we lose everything, Mom." "We are broke." "Shut up," Veronica hissed. "We are not broke. We have the house. We have the cars. We just need to find the damn paper. Tear this room apart. Look in the books. Look under the rug. It has to be here. I watched them destroy my library. They pulled books off the shelves, ripping the pages. They overturned the antique globe. They slashed the cushions of the leather chair. They looked like animals, hyenas tearing at a carcass, finding no meat on the bones. They searched for hours. They found nothing. Finally, exhausted and defeated, they sat amidst the wreckage of my sanctuary. "He can't die," Amber whispered, staring at the wall. "If he dies right now, we are screwed. We need him to wake up. We need him to tell us where the money is." Veronica looked at her hands. The hands that had poured the poison. "I killed the golden goose," she murmured. I turned off the iPad. I looked at Steinberg. "They are ready," I said. Ready for what Steinberg asked. Ready for the bill, I said. I closed my eyes. The hospital bed was hard and the room smelled of antiseptic, but I felt comfortable. Tomorrow I would wake up. Tomorrow I would return from the dead. But tonight I would let them sweat. I would let them sit in the ruin of their own making and wonder where it all went wrong. The safe wasn't empty because I was senile. It was empty because I had cleaned house. And tomorrow they would find out that the house didn't even belong to them anymore. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor that I didn't actually need. I lay in the bed, propped up by 3 pillows, watching the screen of my iPad with the intensity of a general watching a battlefield from a drone. Beside me, my lawyer Steinberg was peeling an orange, the citrus scent cutting through the sterile smell of antiseptic. We were waiting for the second wave of the attack. The first wave had been the empty safe. The second wave was knocking on the front door of my estate at that very moment. It was 10 in the morning. At the house, Veronica was pacing the living room wearing yesterday's makeup and a look of absolute terror. Trey was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. They had spent the night tearing the library apart looking for a will that didn't exist and cash that was already sitting in my new private account. They looked exhausted. They looked defeated. But they didn't know that the floor was about to drop out from under them completely. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite chime of a guest. It was a heavy, insistent pounding. I watched on the screen as Veronica jumped. She looked at Trey. "Who is that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it the police? Did they find out about the tea?" "Answer it, Trey," she hissed, pushing him toward the foyer. Trey stumbled to the door. He opened it. Standing on the porch was a man in a cheap suit holding a thick envelope. Behind him was a tow truck idling in the driveway right next to the Range Rover. "Trey Robinson," the man asked, checking a clipboard. "Yeah, that is me," Trey said, his voice cracking. "Who are you?" "I am a process server," the man said, shoving the envelope into Trey's chest. "You have been served, and I am here to repossess the vehicle, the Range Rover. Payments are 90 days past due." Trey dropped the envelope. "What are you talking about?" "My stepdad pays the lease. The lease was terminated for non-payment," the man said, signaling to the tow truck driver. "And the bank has called the note on the home equity line of credit. That is what the envelope is for. Notice of default and intent to foreclose." I watched Veronica run into the foyer. She snatched the envelope from the floor. She ripped it open, tearing the paper in her haste. "Foreclosure," she screamed, reading the document. "This is impossible. The house is paid off. Harold paid it off 20 years ago." I zoomed in on the camera. I wanted to see her face when she read the details. "It seems Mrs. Banks, the process server, said, stepping back as the tow truck hook rattled against the bumper of the SUV, that you and Mr. Banks took out a $2 million line of credit against the house 6 months ago. The bank froze all accounts due to suspicious activity, remember? That triggered an automatic audit of all outstanding debts. Since the payments haven't been made in 3 months, the bank is taking the house." Veronica went white. She looked at Trey. Trey looked at the floor. I sat up in my hospital bed, a cold smile playing on my lips. I knew about the loan. Of course I knew. I received the alert 6 months ago when a credit inquiry was run on my social security number. I investigated it quietly. I found the documents. My signature was on them, but it was a forgery, a clumsy one. Trey had practiced my signature, but he pressed too hard with the pen. I knew they had taken the money, $2 million. They had gambled it away, spent it on cars, jewelry, and the down payment for the penthouse that fell through. I had let them do it. I had let them dig the hole. Because now that I had reported identity theft, the bank wasn't just coming for the money. They were coming for the fraudsters. "You forged his signature," Veronica shrieked, hitting Trey on the shoulder. "You told me he signed it. You told me he agreed to the loan to help you start your business." I thought he wouldn't notice." Trey stammered, backing away. I thought we could pay it back before he found out. Pay it back with what Veronica screamed. We are broke, Trey. We have nothing. And now we are losing the house. The process server tipped his imaginary hat. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, ma'am, or the sheriff will come to escort you out. He turned and walked away. The tow truck roared to life, dragging the Range Rover down the driveway, the tires screeching in protest. In the foyer, the silence was deafening. Then Amber walked in. She had been standing on the stairs listening. She was wearing a white dress, carrying a Louis Vuitton suitcase. She looked pristine, untouched by the chaos. She walked past Veronica, who was sobbing on the floor. She walked past Trey, who was shaking. Where are you going, babe? Trey asked, reaching for her hand. Don't touch me, she said, her voice like ice. Babe, please, Trey begged. It is just a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Harold will wake up. He will fix it. Harold isn't waking up, Amber said, checking her reflection in the hall mirror. And even if he does, he isn't going to fix a $2 million fraud you committed. You are going to jail, Trey. But we are getting married, Trey whispered. The penthouse. The future. There is no penthouse. Amber laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. There is no money. There is no future. You are a loser, Trey. A broke loser with a criminal record pending. She walked to the door. Wait, Trey yelled. How are you going to leave? They took my car. Amber held up a set of keys. They jingled merrily. I took the keys to the sedan, she said. The old one. It is not a Porsche, but it will get me to the airport. That is Harold's car, Veronica shouted, standing up. You can't take that. Watch me, Amber said. She opened the door. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out into the sunlight, leaving the two parasites to feed on each other. I watched Trey run after her, but he was too late. The sedan peeled out of the driveway, leaving a cloud of dust. Trey fell to his knees in the driveway, screaming her name. It was pathetic. It was tragic. It was perfect. Inside the house, Veronica was hyperventilating. She looked at the foreclosure notice. She looked at the empty spot where the cars used to be. She realized finally that she was trapped. She grabbed her purse. She grabbed her keys to her own car, the one she hadn't driven in years because she preferred being chauffeured. It was a small, compact car she had kept from before our marriage. I have to get to the hospital, she muttered to herself, pacing the foyer. I have to wake him up. I have to make him sign. He can stop this. He has the money. She ran out the door. I looked at Steinberg. She is coming, Arthur, I said. Steinberg nodded. He picked up his phone. Security, he said into the receiver. This is Arthur Steinberg, attorney for Mr. Harold Banks. Yes. We have a code red. A woman named Veronica Banks is approaching the facility. She is not to be admitted under any circumstances. She is a person of interest in an attempted murder investigation. Lock down the floor. I watched the screen as Veronica's car sped out of the driveway. She was driving recklessly, crossing the center line. She was desperate. 20 minutes later, she arrived at Mount Sinai. I switched the feed to the hospital security cameras, which Steinberg had hacked into for me. Veronica ran into the lobby. Her hair was wild. Her mascara was running. She looked like a madwoman. I need to see my husband, she screamed at the receptionist. Harold Banks. Room 402. It is an emergency. I am sorry, ma'am, the receptionist said calmly. Mr. Banks is in isolation. No visitors. You don't understand, she yelled, trying to push past the desk. They are taking our house. He has to sign the papers. He has to tell the bank it was a mistake. 2 large security guards stepped in front of her. Ma'am, you need to step back, one of them said. Get out of my way, she shrieked, clawing at the guard's jacket. I am his wife. I have rights. Let me see him. Let me wake him up. The guard grabbed her arm. Ma'am, we have orders from Mr. Banks's attorney. You are barred from the premises. If you do not leave, we will call the police. Police? She laughed hysterically. Call them. I don't care. Just let me see him. She lunged for the elevators. The guards tackled her. It wasn't a violent tackle, just a firm restraint, but Veronica fought like a cornered animal. She kicked. She bit. She screamed my name. Harold, help me. Harold, save us. I watched from my bed 4 floors above. I watched the woman who had poisoned my tea begging for my help. I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. She didn't want to see me because she loved me. She wanted to see me because she needed a signature. She needed a shield. She wanted to drag my dying body out of bed to save her from the consequences of her own greed. The police arrived at the lobby. They handcuffed her. Not for the poison, not yet, but for disorderly conduct and trespassing. I watched them lead her away. She was slumped over, defeated. I turned to Steinberg. "The house is gone," I said. "The cars are gone, the girl is gone, and now the wife is in custody." Steinberg closed his folder. "And Trey?" I asked. I looked back at the house feed. Trey was sitting in the driveway alone. He was holding his head. He was crying. "He is waiting for his mother," I said. "He doesn't know she isn't coming home tonight." I took a sip of orange juice. "Steinberg Arthur," I said. "Call the bank. Tell them I am awake. Tell them I am ready to cooperate with the fraud investigation regarding the forged HELOC. Tell them I am willing to testify that my stepson and wife conspired to defraud the estate." Steinberg raised an eyebrow. "You are going to send them to prison, Harold." I looked at the screen at the boy sitting in the dust. "I am not sending them anywhere, Arthur. They bought the ticket. I am just punching it." I lay back on the pillows. Tomorrow I would go home. Tomorrow I would face them. But tonight I would sleep. Because for the first time in 10 years I was truly safe. I walked out of the sliding glass doors of Mount Sinai Hospital into the bright Atlanta morning and took a deep breath. The air smelled of exhaust and pine needles, but to me it smelled like resurrection. 24 hours ago I had been wheeled in here on a stretcher playing the part of a dying man. I had watched my wife and stepson shed crocodile tears while mentally measuring my coffin. Now I stood on the curb adjusting my cufflinks, feeling stronger than I had in a decade. The doctors had discharged me with a clean bill of health once the toxicology report confirmed that the heart attack was chemically induced and subsequently flushed from my system. I was not a victim anymore. I was the hammer. My lawyer Steinberg pulled up in his black sedan. He didn't say a word as I slid into the passenger seat. He just handed me a file folder. Inside was the paperwork that would seal the fate of the 2 people who had tried to kill me. "Take me home, Arthur," I said. Steinberg merged onto the highway. The drive to the estate usually took 40 minutes, but today it felt like seconds. My mind was racing, not with fear, but with the cold precision of an architect reviewing a demolition plan. I visualized the structure of their lies, and I knew exactly which beam to pull to bring the whole thing crashing down. When we turned onto the private road leading to my driveway, I saw the flashing lights first. It wasn't the police. It was a private security firm hired by the bank. A large white van was parked diagonally across the entrance, blocking the gate. 2 men in uniforms were stapling bright orange notices to the oak trees that lined the drive. "Foreclosure. Eviction. Do not enter." The words were printed in bold black letters that screamed failure. Steinberg parked the car on the shoulder. I stepped out leaning on my cane, not because I needed it, but because it was part of the costume. I wanted them to see the old man one last time before the monster revealed himself. I walked up the driveway. The scene before me was pathetic. Veronica was sitting on her Louis Vuitton suitcase in the middle of the driveway. Her hair was a bird's nest. Her makeup was smeared across her cheeks in streaks of black and beige. She was holding a bottle of water with a shaking hand. Next to her, Trey was sitting on the asphalt, his head between his knees, rocking back and forth. The Range Rover was gone. The Jaguar was gone. Even the sedan Amber had stolen was gone. They were stranded on an island of asphalt surrounded by the wreckage of their own greed. When Veronica saw me, she froze. She blinked as if she were seeing a ghost. She dropped the water bottle. It rolled away, leaking a dark, wet trail on the ground. "Harold," she whispered. Then she screamed. It was a sound of pure, desperate relief. She scrambled to her feet, stumbling in her heels, and ran toward me. She threw her arms around my neck, sobbing into my blazer. "Oh my God, Harold, you are alive. I thought you were gone. I thought the attack killed you." She pulled back, gripping my lapels, her eyes wild and bloodshot. "You have to help us, Harold. Look at this. Look what they are doing." She pointed a trembling finger at the bank official who was currently placing a padlock on the front door of my house. "They are kicking us out," she wailed. "They say the house is being seized. They say we owe millions. Harold, you have to tell them. Tell them who you are. Tell them this is your house and they can't touch it." I reached up and gently removed her hands from my jacket. I brushed the lapels, smoothing the fabric. I looked at her with a calm detachment that terrified her more than anger would have. "I can't do that, Veronica," I said softly. "What do you mean you can't?" she shrieked. "You are Harold Banks. You designed half this city. Write them a check. Call the mayor. Do something." I looked at the bank official who was walking toward us with a clipboard. He looked tired. He had dealt with people like Veronica before. "Mr. Banks," the official said, nodding to me, "I was told you were indisposed. I am sorry it has come to this, but the default on the home equity line of credit is absolute. The fraud investigation triggered an immediate call on the note. Since the funds cannot be recovered, we are seizing the collateral. Veronica turned to me, her face pleading. Harold, listen to me. We made a mistake. A small mistake. Trey and I, we needed some cash. For the business. For the family. We borrowed against the house. Just a bridge loan. We were going to pay it back, I swear. When the Dubai deal came through, we were going to pay it all back. She was admitting it, finally. She thought that by confessing to the borrowing, she could guilt me into saving them. She thought I was the owner who would protect his property. I looked at Trey, who had finally stood up and was watching us with the eyes of a trapped rat. You borrowed $2 million, Trey asked. Veronica nodded, sobbing. Yes. Yes, we forged your signature. Harold, I am sorry, but we had to. We were desperate. But you can fix it. Just pay the loan, Harold. Please, save our home. I let a silence stretch between us. The wind rustled the orange notices on the trees. I shook my head slowly. I am afraid you have misunderstood the situation, Veronica, I said. Misunderstood what she snapped. We forged the loan. We owe the money. But it is your house, so you are liable. You have to pay it to save the asset. No, I said. I don't. I turned to Steinberg. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a document. It wasn't a bank notice. It was a deed of sale. Veronica, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was pure steel. I do not own this house. She stopped crying. She stared at me. I sold this property 6 months ago, I explained. I sold it to a private holding company called Obsidian LLC. Sold it, she whispered. But we live here. You live here. I smiled. A cold, thin smile. I live here as a tenant, Veronica. When I sold the house, I signed a leaseback agreement. It is a common financial maneuver for retirees. It frees up equity while allowing you to remain in the home. I took the document from Steinberg and held it up. This is the deed transferring ownership from Harold Banks to Obsidian LLC, dated 6 months ago. Veronica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But if you don't own the house, she stammered. Then the loan you took out is invalid, I said. You cannot borrow money against a property that the borrower does not own. When you forged my signature on that application, you committed bank fraud. But here's the kicker, Veronica. I stepped closer, forcing her to look me in the eye. Because I am not the owner, I am not liable for the debt. The bank isn't seizing my asset. They are seizing the property of Obsidian LLC, and Obsidian LLC is very unhappy about that. But who owns Obsidian LLC? Trey asked, stepping forward, his voice shaking. I looked at him. That is a private company, Trey, but that doesn't matter right now. What matters is the lease. I pulled another document from the folder. Do you recognize this, Veronica? I asked. She squinted at the paper. It was a thick legal document. That is the tax form you made me sign, she said. Last month. You said it was for the IRS, to claim head of household status so we could save on taxes. I laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. You really should read what you sign, Veronica, especially when you are plotting to kill the man who feeds you. I flipped to the first page. This is not a tax form. This is a master lease assumption agreement. By signing this, you legally designated yourself as the primary tenant of this property. You assumed full responsibility for all rental payments and liability for the premises. Her eyes went wide. The color drained from her face until she looked like a corpse. You made me the tenant, she whispered. I made you the responsible party, I corrected. And since you haven't paid the rent in 3 months because I stopped paying it, Obsidian LLC has filed for eviction. I pointed to the bank official. And since you forged a loan against a property you were merely renting, you have committed mortgage fraud on top of lease violation. The bank is here to secure the property because of your criminal activity, not mine. Veronica fell to her knees. The gravel crunched under her weight. This can't be real, she sobbed. You tricked me. You tricked me into signing that lease. I didn't trick you, I said. I protected myself. I knew you were stealing, Veronica. I knew about the credit cards. I knew about the watches. Did you think I wouldn't secure my biggest asset? I moved the house out of my name to protect it from you. And then I handed you the lease so that when the hammer fell, it would fall on your head. Trey grabbed my arm. Harold, please, he begged, tears streaming down his face. You can't let us go to jail. If the bank finds out we forged the loan on a house we didn't own, that is federal. That is 20 years. I looked at his hand on my sleeve. I looked at the gold watch he was wearing. My gold watch. I removed his hand. It is Federal Trey, I agreed. And since I have already given my statement to the fraud department testifying that I did not sign those papers and that I do not own this home, the police should be arriving any minute. Police, Veronica screamed. You called the police, I checked my watch. The cheap plastic one I was wearing because my Rolex was in the safe. They are about 5 minutes out, I said. Veronica scrambled backward, crawling on the asphalt like a crab. You are a monster, she hissed. You planned this. You let us borrow the money. You let us think we were rich. I let you show me who you were, I said. I gave you a rope, Veronica. I thought you might use it to climb out of the hole. Instead, you used it to try and hang me, so I just kicked the chair away. The sound of sirens cut through the morning air, distant at first, then growing louder. Veronica looked at the gate. She looked at the woods. She looked at me. Run! She screamed at Trey. Run! Trey didn't move. He was paralyzed by the magnitude of his stupidity. I stood there leaning on my cane, watching the end of my marriage approach with flashing blue lights. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy. I felt clean. The house behind me was just wood and stone. I could buy another one. I could build another one. But the freedom of standing there watching the consequences arrive for the people who had tormented me, that was priceless. Harold, Veronica begged, clutching my pant leg one last time. I am your wife. You were my wife, I said, looking down at her. Now you are just a tenant with a very bad credit score. I turned to Steinberg. Let's go, Arthur. I have a meeting with the real estate agent. I need to find a new apartment, something with a view, and no guest bedrooms. We walked back to the car, leaving them in the driveway as the police cruisers turned in. I didn't look back. I had already seen enough. The blue lights of the police cruisers were hypnotic, rotating in the morning mist, like a lighthouse warning ships away from a jagged coast. I sat in the passenger seat of Arthur Steinberg's black sedan. The window rolled down just enough to let in the cool air and the sounds of my family disintegrating. We hadn't left the driveway yet. I told Arthur to wait. I wanted to watch the dust settle. I wanted to see what happens when rats realize the ship isn't just sinking but is already at the bottom of the ocean. Veronica was standing by the gate arguing with a female officer about her jewelry. She was trying to convince the cop that the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist was a family heirloom and not purchased with the proceeds of the fraudulent loan. She looked small, desperate, and pathetic, but it was Trey who caught my attention. He was standing near the remains of the front door, holding his phone like it was a grenade that had just had the pin pulled. His face was the color of old ash. He was shaking so violently that I could see the phone vibrating in his hand from 20 feet away. Then he put it on speaker. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but in the quiet of the morning sound carries. And Amber's voice was a shrill, piercing weapon that cut through the humidity. You have to get me out, Trey, she was screaming. I am at the precinct. They booked me. They fingerprinted me. They put me in a cell with a woman who smells like bleach and gasoline. Trey held the phone with both hands. I can't, Amber. I don't have any money. The accounts are frozen. The house is gone. Mom is being questioned. I don't care about your mother, Amber shrieked. The cops pulled me over on I-85. They said the sedan was reported stolen. They said the owner, Harold Banks, filed a report hours ago. You told me he was dying, Trey. You told me he wouldn't notice the car was gone. He woke up. Trey stammered, tears streaming down his face. He isn't dying. He is sitting right there in the car watching us. He knows everything. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a cold, heavy silence that was more terrifying than her screaming. He knows everything, Amber whispered. Yes, Trey sobbed. The loan, the forgery, the watches, everything. Does he know about the tea? Amber asked. Trey froze. He looked over at my car. He met my eyes. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I just sat there judging him. I don't know, Trey whispered. Well, you better find out, Amber hissed, because the detective here is offering me a deal. He says if I give him something bigger than a stolen car, he can talk to the DA. He wants to know why I was fleeing the state. He wants to know about the domestic situation. Don't do it, Amber, Trey begged, dropping to his knees on the gravel. Don't say anything. That is conspiracy to commit murder. That is life in prison. It is only life in prison if I go down for it, Amber said, her voice cold and detached. But if I turn state's witness, if I tell them that Veronica mixed the foxglove and you bought the prepaid card to order it online, maybe I just get probation. I am just the girlfriend Trey. I didn't pour the cup. Amber, please, Trey cried. You have 10 minutes, Trey, she said. Get me a lawyer, get me bail money, or I start talking about the botanical garden your mother was growing in the kitchen. The line went dead. Trey stayed on his knees, staring at the phone. He looked at his mother, who was still arguing about her bracelet, oblivious to the fact that the guillotine blade was hovering inches above her neck. He looked at me. I saw the calculation happen in real time. It was a primitive survival instinct kicking in, the kind that makes a starving animal eat its own young. He realized that the ship had gone down and there was only one life raft left. Me. He stood up. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He didn't walk toward his mother. He walked toward my car. He moved fast, stumbling over his own feet. He reached the window and gripped the frame, his fingers white. Harold, he gasped. Harold, please, wait. I looked at him. I didn't roll the window down any further. You are blocking my view, Trey, I said calmly. Harold, she is going to talk, he said, his words tumbling out in a panic. Amber, she is going to tell them. Tell them what I asked, feigning ignorance. That she stole my car. I already told them that. No, Harold. About the tea. About the heart attack. I raised an eyebrow. My heart attack was natural, Trey. The doctor said it was stress. It wasn't stress, he blurted out, leaning closer, his breath smelling of fear and stale alcohol. It was poison. I signaled Steinberg with a small hand gesture. He tapped the record button on the console. Poison, I repeated. That is a very serious accusation, Trey. It was Mom, he said. He didn't even hesitate. He threw her under the bus so fast I almost felt the tires bump. It was all her idea. She read about it in some gardening book. Foxglove, digitalis. She said it mimics heart failure. She has been putting it in your chamomile for weeks. I kept my face neutral, though inside I was reeling. Hearing it confirmed, hearing the details from the boy I raised was a different kind of pain. And you knew about this, I asked. I tried to stop her. Trey lied. I told her it was dangerous, but she said we needed the money. She said you were going to cut us off. She made me buy the prepaid visa to order the extract from a supplier in China. She said if I didn't do it, she would kick me out. So you helped her, I said. You facilitated an assassination attempt on your stepfather because you wanted a penthouse. I was scared, Harold, he pleaded, gripping the door handle. She is crazy. You know how she is. She dominates everything. I am a victim here too. You are an accomplice, Trey, I corrected him. Harold, listen to me, he whispered, looking back at Veronica, who was now watching us with suspicion. I can testify. I can tell the police everything. I can give you the laptop where she ordered it. I can show you the emails. I will give you everything on a silver platter. Just don't let them arrest me. Tell them I was a whistleblower. Tell them I came to you. He was selling his mother for a get-out-of-jail-free card. It was the most despicable thing I had ever seen. I looked at him. You want a deal, I asked. Yes, he nodded frantically. A deal. Immunity. Anything. I will testify against her. I will send her away for life. Just save me, Harold. I am your son. I looked at the record light on the console. It was glowing a steady red. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen and held it up. I recorded that, Trey, I said. He froze. What? I have it all, I said. The confession, the details about the prepaid card, the supplier, the timeline, and most importantly, the fact that you knew about it for weeks and did nothing. But I am helping you, he stammered, backing away. You aren't helping me, son, I said, my voice cold as the grave. You are hanging yourself. You just admitted to conspiracy to commit murder. You admitted to financing the weapon. You aren't a whistleblower. You are a co-conspirator who got caught. Trey's face crumbled. He realized he had walked into the final trap. Trey, Veronica's voice cut through the air. She was standing 10 feet away. She had walked over while we were talking. She had heard the last part. She had heard him say he would send her away for life. She looked at her son. Her eyes were wide, not with fear, but with betrayal. You told him, she whispered. You told him about the tea. Mom, Trey stuttered, turning to face her. Amber was going to talk. I had to do something. You traitor, she screamed. She didn't look like a socialite anymore. She looked like a banshee. She lunged at him. She clawed at his face. You stupid, ungrateful parasite, I did it for you. I did it so you could have your stupid car. I did it so you could live like a king, and you sell me out to him. She slapped him. A hard cracking sound that echoed off the metal of the car. Trey shoved her back. Get off me. You are the one who poisoned him. You are the one who ruined everything. I never wanted to kill him. You made me. I stood there by the car watching them tear each other apart. It was biblical. The house was locked. The money was gone, and now the blood bond was broken. The police officers ran over. They pulled Veronica off of Trey. She was kicking and screaming, spitting curses at her own child. "He is lying," she shrieked at the cops. It was his idea. He found the website. He mixed the powder. "Arrest him, arrest my son." "It wasn't me," Trey yelled back, cowering behind an officer. "She is the psychopath. Check her search history. Check the spice rack." I rolled up the window. The glass muted their screams, turning their rage into a silent movie of self-destruction. Steinberg looked at me. He stopped the recording. "We have enough," he said. "That recording plus the toxicology report plus Amber's testimony, they are never seeing the outside of a cell again." I looked at them one last time. Veronica was being handcuffed. Trey was being shoved into the back of a separate cruiser. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at each other with pure, unadulterated hatred. "I broke them," I said softly. "You didn't break them," Harold Steinberg said, putting the car in gear. "You just turned on the lights. They broke themselves trying to scurry into the dark." "Drive, Arthur," I said. "I am hungry." "Where to?" Steinberg asked as we pulled away, leaving the blue lights behind. "Somewhere quiet," I said. "Somewhere with no family." We drove past the orange foreclosure signs. We drove past the gate I had designed to keep the world out. I realized now that the gate had been useless because the enemy was already inside, but they were gone now. I took a deep breath. The air in the car was still. It was peaceful. I took out my phone. I deleted Trey's contact. I deleted Veronica's contact. 1 click, 2 clicks. And just like that, I was an orphan of my own making, and I had never felt better. The fluorescent lights of the precinct conference room hummed with a low, irritating buzz that sounded like a trapped fly. It was a stark contrast to the warm lighting of my library or the soft glow of the chandeliers Veronica loved so much. I sat at the head of the metal table, my hands folded on the cold surface. Steinberg stood behind me like a sentinel, his briefcase closed, his face unreadable. We were waiting for the guests of honor. The door opened and the officer led them in. Veronica and Trey. They looked like shadows of the people who had walked around my house like royalty just days ago. Veronica was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with her skin tone, her hair pulled back in a severe, messy bun. Her makeup was gone, revealing the lines of age and bitterness she had spent thousands trying to hide. Trey shuffled in behind her, his wrists cuffed to his waist, his head hanging low. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was waiting for the belt. They sat down opposite me. The officer uncuffed Trey's hands from his waist but left the wrists bound, then stepped back to the door. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Veronica stared at me with a mixture of hatred and fear. Trey just stared at the table. I reached into my briefcase. I moved slowly, deliberately. I wanted them to see every movement. I pulled out the first item, a clear plastic evidence bag containing a small vial of liquid and a stack of papers stapled together. I placed it on the table. It made a soft slap against the metal. "This," I said, my voice calm and echoing in the small room, "is the toxicology report from my blood work at Mount Sinai. It shows lethal levels of digitalis. Next to it is the printout of the online order for foxglove extract paid for with a prepaid Visa card purchased by Trey. And on this USB drive is the recording of you two discussing the dosage in my kitchen." Veronica flinched. She looked at the bag as if it were a venomous snake. I reached into the briefcase again. I pulled out a yellow slip of paper. It was wrinkled. It smelled faintly of stale tobacco smoke. I placed it next to the toxicology report. "This is a pawn shop ticket from Silas's exchange. It lists 3 vintage watches, a Patek Philippe, a Vacheron Constantin, and a Rolex Submariner. It is signed by Trey Robinson and it bears his right thumbprint in black ink. It is proof of grand larceny and the sale of stolen property across state lines since the buyer Silas ships internationally." Trey let out a small whimper. He knew exactly what that ticket meant. It meant 10 years minimum. I reached into the briefcase a third time. I pulled out a thick document bound in blue paper. It was the foreclosure notice and the fraud investigation report from the bank regarding the home equity line of credit. I placed it next to the pawn ticket. "And this is the evidence of bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. $2 million borrowed against a house you didn't own using a signature that wasn't yours. I lined them up perfectly. 3 piles. 3 crimes. 3 nails in their coffins." I looked at them. "You are looking at life in prison," I said. "Attempted murder, grand larceny, federal bank fraud. The district attorney is very excited about this case. He calls it a slam dunk. He says juries hate people who poison old men." Veronica began to cry. It wasn't a sad cry. It was an angry, frustrated cry. "What do you want, Harold?" she spat. "You came here to gloat. You came here to watch us suffer." I leaned back in my chair. "I came here to offer you a choice," I said. "A choice?" she asked, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Yes. I have spoken to the district attorney. He respects me. He knows I am the victim here. He is willing to offer a plea deal, but only if I agree to it. Only if I say that I am satisfied with the outcome." I pointed to the 3 piles. Option 1 is simple. We proceed to trial. I testify. The recordings play in open court. The bank testifies. Silas testifies. You both go to federal prison for 20 to 30 years. You lose everything. You die in a cage. Trey started shaking. "I can't go to prison, Harold. I can't. They will kill me in there." I ignored him. "Option 2, I continued, is that you sign this." I signaled Steinberg. He slid a document across the table. "What is this?" Veronica asked, squinting at the paper. "It is a confession," I said, "but not to the murder. It is a confession of financial liability. By signing this, you admit that the $2 million debt is yours and yours alone. You agree to take on the full repayment of the loan plus interest and penalties. You agree to a divorce with 0 alimony, 0 settlement, and a full restraining order. You agree to leave Atlanta within 24 hours and never contact me or any of my associates again." I leaned forward. "If you sign this, I will tell the DA that the poisoning was a misunderstanding, that I took the wrong medication. I will tell Silas I found the watches and dropped the theft charges. I will tell the bank that I am not pressing charges for the fraud as long as the debt is assigned to you personally. You want us to take the debt." Veronica screamed. $2 million. "We can't pay that, Harold. We have nothing." "Exactly," I said. "You will have nothing. You will be broke. You will be in debt for the rest of your lives. Your wages will be garnished. Your credit will be destroyed. You will never own a home again. You will work minimum wage jobs until the day you die just to pay off the interest." I looked her in the eye. "That is the price of your freedom, Veronica. You can be a prisoner of the state or a prisoner of your own debt. Choose." Veronica stared at the paper. She looked at the orange jumpsuit she was wearing. She looked at the bleak concrete walls. "If we sign, you drop the murder charge," she whispered. "I drop my testimony," I said. "Without me, the case falls apart." She looked at Trey. He was nodding frantically. "Sign it, Mom," he begged. "Sign it. I don't want to go to jail. I will work. I will do anything. Just get me out of here." Veronica looked back at me. Her eyes were filled with a venom so pure it was almost impressive. "You planned this," she hissed. "You engineered this whole thing. You let us borrow the money so you could trap us with the debt." "I didn't force you to sign anything, Veronica," I said. "I didn't force you to steal. I didn't force you to pour poison in my cup. You did those things because you are greedy and you are stupid." She grabbed the pen. Her hand was shaking so hard she almost dropped it. "You are a monster," she said, her voice low and guttural. "You are a cold-hearted bastard. I took care of you. I wasted the best years of my life on you. And this is how you repay me. You ruin me. You leave me with nothing but debt." I watched her sign. The scratch of the pen was loud in the silence. "You are cold-blooded, Harold," she screamed, throwing the pen at me. It bounced off my chest and fell to the floor. "How can you do this to your family? How can you sleep at night knowing you destroyed us?" I picked up the pen. I put it back in my pocket. I looked at the woman who had watched me writhe on the floor in fake agony and done nothing. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. "I am cold-blooded, Veronica," I admitted, looking down at her. I picked up the evidence bags. I wasn't going to give them to the police. I was going to keep them, just in case they ever forgot their place. Being cold-blooded is better than being a murderer. I said, my voice flat and final. I turned to Trey. "Goodbye, son. Good luck with the job hunt. I hear the construction industry is hiring laborers. It is hard work, but it pays honest money." I walked toward the door. Steinberg gathered the papers. Veronica was screaming now, screaming curses, screaming that she would find a way back, screaming that I would pay. I paused at the door. "You are already paying, Veronica," I said without looking back. "That is how debt works. Debt." I walked out of the room. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me, cutting off her screams. I stood in the hallway for a moment. I took a deep breath. The air in the precinct smelled of floor wax and coffee. It was over. They were free, technically, but they were shackled to a mountain of debt that would crush them slowly for decades. Every time they got a paycheck, the bank would take a cut. Every time they tried to buy a car, they would be denied. They would live in the shadow of the fortune they almost stole. It was a punishment worse than prison. Prison ends. Poverty and debt in a world you used to rule that is a torture that renews itself every single morning. I looked at Steinberg. "Let's go get some lunch, Arthur," I said. "I am in the mood for a steak." We walked out into the sunshine. I didn't need the cane anymore. I carried it under my arm. I was 72 years old. I was single. I was wealthy. And I was completely free. The demolition was complete. The rubble was cleared. Now it was time to build something new. There is a specific sound a zipper makes when it closes on a life. It is a sharp, final hiss that divides the past from the future. I stood in the master bedroom of the estate I had designed 30 years ago and pulled the zipper on my leather valise. I was not packing much. I did not need the Italian silk ties Veronica had bought me to match her dresses. I did not need the cufflinks that were really just shackles in disguise. I packed only what was real. My original drafting pencils. The photo of my first wife Bernice that I had kept hidden in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. The blueprints for the first skyscraper I ever built. And the black debit card that held the freedom I had clawed back from the edge of the grave. The house was quiet. The police had finished their work. The foreclosure notices were stapled to the front gate, fluttering in the wind like orange flags of surrender. Veronica and Trey had been released on their own recognizance pending the arraignment for the fraud charges. They were on their way back. They were coming home expecting to find a husband they could manipulate, a stepfather they could guilt into saving them one last time. They thought that because they had signed the confession, because they had accepted the debt, I would let them stay. They thought the house was still a sanctuary. They were wrong. I walked down the grand staircase for the last time. My cane tapped against the marble, but I didn't lean on it. I carried it like a scepter. I walked into the foyer and placed my bag by the door. I looked at the crystal chandelier that Veronica had insisted on installing. It was gaudy. It was excessive. It was exactly like her. Beautiful to look at, but cold to the touch and terrifyingly expensive to maintain. The front door opened. They walked in. Veronica looked like a woman who had walked through a hurricane. Her orange jumpsuit had been exchanged for the wrinkled clothes she had been arrested in. Her hair was flat. Her eyes were hollow. Trey trailed behind her, looking less like a man and more like a shadow that had lost its object. They stopped when they saw me standing there with my bag. Harold, Veronica whispered. Her voice was cracked dry from hours of screaming in a holding cell. "Where are you going?" I buttoned my jacket. I smoothed the lapels. "I am leaving Veronica," I said simply. "Leaving?" She repeated, blinking as if the word made no sense. "You can't leave. This is your house. We just signed the papers. We took the debt, Harold. We did what you asked. You said if we signed, you would help us." I shook my head slowly. I said I would drop the testimony I corrected. I said I would not press charges for the theft. And I kept my word. The police are not here. You are not in jail. You are free. I picked up my bag. But my freedom, Veronica, does not include living with the people who tried to bury me. Trey stepped forward. He looked at the bag, then back at me. "But where are we supposed to go?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You can't just leave us here. The bank, the foreclosure." I smiled. It was a cold, professional smile, the kind I used to give to contractors who failed to meet code. "That brings me to the second matter," I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single white envelope. I placed it on the console table under the hallway mirror. "What is that?" Veronica asked, staring at the envelope with dread. "That I said is a notice from the landlord." "The landlord?" she stammered. "But you said Obsidian LLC owns the house." "Correct," I said. Obsidian LLC is the holding company. And as the primary investor in Obsidian LLC, I have directed the management to terminate the lease effective immediately. "Terminate the lease," she whispered. "Yes," I continued. "You see, Veronica, when you signed that assumption of lease document, you became the primary tenant. But a tenant requires a guarantor, someone with credit, someone with assets. Until this morning, that guarantor was me. I was backing your residency." I took a step toward the door. "But 10 minutes ago, I withdrew my guarantee." Veronica grabbed the table to steady herself. "You withdrew it." "I did. And without a guarantor, considering your current credit score, which is now non-existent, and your debt load, which is now over $2 million, thanks to the confession you signed, Obsidian LLC considers you a high-risk tenant." I looked at the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. "You have 24 hours to vacate the premises," I said. At noon tomorrow, the locks will be changed. The security code will be reset. Anything left inside will be considered abandoned property and auctioned off to pay a fraction of the back rent you owe. 24 hours, Veronica shrieked. Her fatigue vanished, replaced by pure panic. You can't do that. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. You took the 200,000. You took everything. I didn't take it, Veronica, I said, my voice hard. I recovered it. That was the cost of doing business with you. But the loans, she cried. We borrowed that money, Harold. We borrowed 50,000 from people you don't say no to. We borrowed from sharks. If we don't pay them back. She stopped. She realized what she had said. She admitted that she wasn't just in debt to the bank. She was in debt to the streets. I looked at her. I saw the terror in her eyes. The realization that she wasn't just broke, she was hunted. That sounds like a personal problem, I said. I opened the door. The afternoon sun flooded the foyer, blindingly bright. Harold, please, Trey begged, falling to his knees. He was crying again. He was always crying when the consequences arrived. Don't leave us. They will kill us. The loan sharks. They know where we live. They know where you lived, I corrected. By tomorrow you won't live here anymore. I suggest you start running. Or start working. I hear the night shift at the warehouse is always hiring. I walked out onto the porch. The air was fresh. It smelled of pine and rain. Harold, Veronica screamed, running to the doorway. She tried to grab my arm, but she missed. She stumbled, tripping over her own feet, falling onto the slate porch. I didn't stop. I walked down the steps. My car was waiting. A town car I had hired. I wasn't driving. I was being driven. Harold, come back, she wailed. I am your wife. I love you. I paused at the car door. I turned around one last time. I looked at the woman sprawled on the porch. I looked at the sun cowering in the doorway. I looked at the house that had been my pride and joy. It was just a building now, a structure of wood and stone infected by a rot I had finally cut out. You don't love me, Veronica, I called back to her. You love the lifestyle, and I am taking it with me. I got into the car. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. Where to, Mr. Banks, he asked. I looked at the house as we pulled away. I saw Veronica standing up, screaming at the closed gate. I saw Trey slumping against the doorframe. They were small. They were insignificant. They were in the past. Take me to the airport, I said. I have a flight to catch. Going on vacation, sir? The driver asked. No, I said, settling back into the leather seat. I am going to start a new life. I closed my eyes. I thought about the debt they now carried. $2 million to the bank, $50,000 to the loan sharks. No assets, no home, no reputation. They were in a prison of their own making, a prison with no walls but no exit. The car turned onto the main road. The estate disappeared behind the trees. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying for 10 years. I checked my pocket. The black card was there. The photo of Bernice was there. I was 72 years old, and I had never felt so young. The demolition was over, the site was cleared, and the silence was beautiful. The eviction was not a noisy affair. It was surgical. At exactly noon, the sheriff deputies arrived at the estate not with sirens, but with a quiet efficiency that made the whole process feel even more final. I was not there to see it physically, but my security team live streamed the event to the large monitor in my new office downtown. I watched as Veronica and Trey dragged their suitcases down the long driveway, the wheels clattering against the slate. They looked back once at the house that had been their kingdom for 10 years. The locks were already being changed. The gate was closing. They were on the street. They had no car because the bank had repossessed the SUV and Amber had stolen the sedan. They had no cash because they had given it all to me for the fake investment. And they had no friends because people like Veronica and Trey only cultivate relationships that have a transaction value, and their value had just hit zero. I watched them stand on the curb. Veronica was making a call. She was calling the number on the eviction notice, the number for Obsidian LLC. I picked up the phone on my desk. It rang. Obsidian LLC Executive Office. I answered, changing my voice slightly to sound like a receptionist. Please hold. I put her on hold. I let her listen to the elevator music. I let her sweat in the midday Georgia sun while the reality of her situation sank in. After 10 minutes, I picked up again. Mr. Black will see you now, I said, using my pseudonym. Come to the Centennial Tower. Penthouse suite. You have 1 hour to appeal the eviction. I hung up. I sat back in my leather chair and spun around to face the window. The Centennial Tower is the tallest building in Atlanta. I know because I designed it in 1998. I occupy the top floor. From here, the cars look like ants and the people look like nothing at all. It gives you a perspective on power. An hour later, my assistant buzzed me. "They are here, Mr. Banks. They look distressed." "Send them in," I said, "and keep the door locked behind them." I spun my chair around so that my back was to the door. I wanted them to see the view first. I wanted them to see the city I had helped build. The heavy oak doors creaked open. I heard the shuffle of feet. I heard Veronica's ragged breathing. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Is this Mr. Black?" We spoke on the phone. "We are the tenants from the Oak Creek estate. There has been a terrible mistake." I didn't turn around. I kept looking at the horizon. "There is no mistake, Ms. Banks," I said, my voice deep and distorted by the acoustics of the high-backed chair. "You are in default. You have been evicted." "Please," Trey begged, stepping forward. "We have nowhere to go. We can pay. We just need time. My stepfather, Harold Banks, he is a wealthy man. He will vouch for us. He had a mental break. He abandoned us. But once he comes back to his senses, he will pay the rent." I smiled. They were still using my name as a shield. Even after I had left them, they were trying to hide behind my reputation. "Your stepfather is not coming back," I said. Veronica stepped closer. "Listen to me. The lease. It is complicated. I didn't know what I was signing. I was tricked. But we have rights. You can't just throw a family on the street without a hearing. We will sue you. We will sue Obsidian LLC for everything it is worth." I laughed. It was a low, dry sound. "You want to sue Obsidian LLC?" I asked. "Yes," she hissed, getting some of her old fire back. "We will drag you into court. We will expose your predatory practices. Do you know who I am? I am Veronica Banks. I have connections." I spun the chair around. "I know exactly who you are, Veronica," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a heart stopping. Veronica dropped her purse. Trey backed up until he hit the door. They stared at me sitting there in the tailored suit of a CEO, looking healthier and sharper than I had in years. "Harold," she whispered. "Hello, Veronica," I said, gesturing to the empty chairs in front of my desk. "Please, sit down. You wanted to speak to the management." You are Mr. Black," she stammered. "I am the managing director of Obsidian LLC," I said, "and I am the sole shareholder." She looked around the massive office. She looked at the architectural awards on the wall. She looked at the nameplate on the desk. "You own the company," she gasped. I leaned forward, steepling my fingers. "Did you really think I sold my house to a stranger, Veronica? Did you think I would let my life's work pass into the hands of some random investor?" I stood up and walked to the window. 6 months ago, when I first discovered you were poisoning me, I didn't just go to the police. Police take too long, and they can't protect assets from a divorce court. If I had divorced you, then you would have claimed half the house. You would have fought me for years. You would have lived there while I paid the bills. I turned back to face them. So I sold it. I created Obsidian LLC. I transferred the title of the house to the company for a fair market price paid from my trust to the LLC. A perfectly legal transaction. The house ceased to be a marital asset and became a corporate asset. I walked over to Trey, who was shaking like a leaf. "And then I had you sign the lease assumption," I said. "You thought you were signing a tax form, but you were signing a commercial lease. You became tenants of my company." "This is fraud," Veronica screamed. "This is entrapment. It is business," I said, cold as ice. "You are not my wife in this room, Veronica. You are a liability on my balance sheet, and today I am liquidating that liability." I walked back to my desk and picked up a file. "You came here to ask for an extension, to beg for time." "Yes," she cried. "Just a month. Give us a month to find a place." "We have no money, Harold. The accounts. You took everything." "I recovered my losses," I corrected. "And regarding your request for an extension," I opened the file. I pretended to read it. "Application denied." Why, she wailed, falling to her knees on the plush carpet. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you are bad tenants," I said, closing the file. "You damaged the property. You attempted to murder the landlord, and you forged a $2 million loan against the company's asset." I looked at them. In the corporate world, when an employee steals from the company and tries to kill the CEO, we don't give them a severance package. We fire them. I pressed a button on my desk. "Security, please escort the former tenants from the building." The doors opened. 2 large men in black suits entered. They were professional, silent, and imposing. "No," Trey shouted as they grabbed his arms. "No, Harold, please, you can't do this. I am your son." "You are a trespasser," I said, turning my back on them. Veronica lunged for my desk. She tried to grab the nameplate. She tried to grab anything. "I will kill you," she screamed as the guards dragged her back. "I will kill you for this." "You already tried," I said over my shoulder. "And you failed." They dragged them out. I listened to their screams fade down the hallway. I listened to the elevator ding as it arrived to take them down to the street, to the pavement, to the reality they had tried so hard to escape. I walked back to the window. I looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, amidst the traffic and the noise, Veronica and Trey were standing on a sidewalk with their suitcases. They had a debt of $2 million. They had a criminal record pending. And they had just been fired from the only life they knew. I took a deep breath. I picked up my phone. I dialed Steinberg. "It is done, Arthur," I said. "How did they take it?" Steinberg asked. "They were surprised," I said. "They didn't know I had a corner office." "And the house?" Steinberg asked. "Sell it," I said. "Liquidate it. I don't want to live there anymore. It smells like them." "What will you do?" Steinberg asked. I looked around the office. It was clean. It was modern. It was mine. "I am going to build something new." "Arthur," I said, "I have some ideas, some blueprints I haven't looked at in years." I hung up. I sat there for a long time watching the sun set over Atlanta. The city lights began to twinkle on like diamonds. I was alone. But for the first time in my life, being alone didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like victory. I opened my drawer and took out a fresh drafting pencil. I pulled a clean sheet of paper toward me. I started to draw. A new foundation. A new structure. No cracks. No rot. Just steel and stone and the quiet satisfaction of a man who had cleaned his own house. The coffee tasted different now. It was rich and dark with notes of chocolate and cherry, but the most distinct flavor was the absence of metallic bitterness. For the first time in 10 years, I could drink a cup of coffee without wondering if it was going to stop my heart. I sat on the balcony of my new penthouse apartment on the 25th floor of the Sovereign Building. Below me, the surface of the lake shimmered like a sheet of hammered silver reflecting the morning sun. It was quiet up here. No screaming, no accusations, no greedy whispers in the hallway. Just the wind and the distant hum of the city I had helped build. It had been 30 days since the eviction. 30 days since I watched the empire of lies Veronica and Trey had built crumble into dust. In that time, I had not been idle. I had liquidated the estate, selling the house to a developer who planned to tear it down and build condos. I didn't care. The memories in that wood and stone had been poisoned. I wanted a fresh start. I wanted steel and glass and a view of the horizon. My phone buzzed on the glass table. It was Arthur Steinberg. I picked it up and put it on speaker. "Good morning," Harold Steinberg said, his voice chipper. "I have the update from the district attorney. You are going to like this." "Tell me, Arthur," I said, taking a sip of my safe coffee. Amber flipped, Steinberg said. She didn't just sing Harold, she composed an entire opera. She walked into the DA's office with her lawyer and laid everything out. She gave them the dates Veronica ordered the foxglove. She gave them the text messages where Trey complained about the cost of the poison. She even handed over a video she took of Veronica mixing the tea one night. Apparently she was keeping it as insurance in case Veronica ever tried to cut her out. I shook my head, looking out at the water. "There is no honor among thieves, Arthur." "None at all." Steinberg agreed. "But here is the kicker. Based on Amber's testimony, they got a warrant for a hair follicle test on you. The samples we took at the hospital. The lab results came back this morning. Positive for chronic digitalis exposure over a period of 6 months. So it is official," I said. "It is official," Steinberg said. "They arrested Veronica an hour ago. They picked her up at a motel on the outskirts of town where she was hiding. She was trying to pawn her wedding ring, but nobody would take it because it was flagged as stolen property. She is being charged with attempted murder, first-degree fraud, and conspiracy. With the hair test and Amber's testimony, she is looking at 20 years minimum. No bail." "And Trey?" I asked. Steinberg paused. "Trey is a different story. Amber painted him as a reluctant accomplice, stupid but manipulated. He is facing charges for the fraud and the theft, but since he signed your confession and accepted the debt, The DA is going easy on the jail time. He is out on probation. But Harold, he is drowning. The bank is garnishing 80% of his wages. He is working 3 jobs just to pay the interest. I know, I said. I have been tracking the payments. They are small, but they are regular. He wants to see you, Steinberg said. I know, I said again. He is downstairs in the lobby. The concierge just buzzed me. Do you want me to send security? Steinberg asked. No, Arthur. Let him come up. I have one last thing to give him. I hung up. I waited. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing in the hallway was a man I barely recognized. The Trey I knew wore Italian loafers and silk shirts. The Trey I knew smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. This man smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit with a patch that said City Sanitation on the chest. His hands were rough, his fingernails rimmed with dirt. He looked thin. His eyes were sunken deep into his skull, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. Hello, Trey, I said. He didn't look me in the eye. He looked at his boots, which were scuffed and worn. Mr. Banks, he whispered. He didn't call me Harold. He didn't call me Dad. He knew he had lost that privilege. Come in, I said, stepping aside. But leave your boots by the door. I just had the floors polished. He took off his boots, his hands shaking. He walked into the living room, his socks leaving faint, dusty prints on the marble. He looked around at the art on the walls, the sleek, modern furniture, the view of the lake. It was a paradise he had once thought belonged to him by right. Now he was just a visitor. Sit, I said, pointing to a wooden stool at the kitchen island. Not the couch. The stool. He sat down, keeping his hands in his lap. I heard about your mother, I said, leaning against the counter. Yeah, he croaked. I saw it on the news. They showed her in handcuffs. She looked old. Justice ages people, Trey, I said, especially when you have spent your life running from it. He looked up at me then. His eyes were filled with tears. Real tears this time. Not the crocodile tears he used to shed to get a new car. These were the tears of a man who was hungry and tired. I am starving, Mr. Banks, he said, his voice cracking. I haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days. The bank takes everything. I make $12 an hour cleaning the subway station. After the garnishment, I have $50 a week to live on. My rent for the room I rent is $40. I have $10 for food. $10. He wiped his nose with his sleeve. Please, he begged. I know I messed up. I know I was awful. But I am starving. Can you loan me $20? Just for a burger. I will pay you back. I swear. I looked at him. I looked at the boy who used to order lobster at the country club and complain if it was tough. I looked at the boy who had stolen my watches to buy bottle service. Hunger is a powerful teacher, isn't it, Trey? I asked. Yes, he sobbed. It hurts. My stomach hurts all the time. I walked over to the counter. I picked up an apple from the fruit bowl. I slid it across the marble. Eat, I said. He grabbed the apple and bit into it like a wild animal. Juice ran down his chin. He devoured it in seconds, core and all. Thank you, he gasped. Thank you. I watched him eat. I didn't feel pity. I felt a grim satisfaction. Not because he was suffering, but because he was finally understanding the value of $1. I reached into my drawer. I have something for you, Trey, I said. His eyes lit up. He thought I was reaching for my wallet. He thought I was going to pull out a stack of hundreds like I used to. He leaned forward, hope flaring in his eyes. I pulled out a single piece of paper. I placed it on the counter in front of him. What is this? He asked, staring at it. It is an application, I said. He read the header. Banks Construction Group, Labor Division. I called the foreman at my old site downtown, I said. They are pouring concrete for the new foundation next week. It is hard work, Trey. It is 12 hours a day carrying bags of cement, mixing slurry, hauling rebar. It destroys your back. It blisters your hands. It makes you sweat until you can't sweat anymore. I tapped the paper. But it pays $25 an hour. And because I own the company, I can defer the garnishment on the first $500 of your paycheck. That means you get to keep enough to eat, enough to rent a better room. Trey looked at the paper. He looked at me. You want me to work construction? He asked. Manual labor. You are already doing manual labor, I pointed out, looking at his jumpsuit. But you are doing it for minimum wage because you have no skills. This is a trade, Trey. If you work hard, if you show up on time, if you learn how to mix the concrete right, you can become a foreman in 5 years. You can make a living. An honest living. He touched the paper. But can't you just give me some cash? He whispered. You have millions, Harold. $20 is nothing to you. It is everything, Trey, I said, my voice hardening. If I give you $20 you eat for a day, then you come back tomorrow. You become a beggar. I am not raising a beggar. I tried to raise a son, but you chose to be a parasite. Now I am offering you the chance to be a man. I walked around the counter and stood in front of him. You want to eat? I asked. Yes, he nodded. Then you work, I said. You roll up your sleeves. You sweat. You earn it. That apple you just ate cost me 50 cents. I earned that 50 cents by designing buildings that don't fall down. How are you going to earn your next apple? He looked at the application. He looked at his dirty hands. He realized that the bank of Harold Banks was closed forever. There would be no more handouts, no more bailouts, no more shortcuts. He picked up the pen I had placed next to the paper. His hand shook as he wrote his name. Trey Robinson. He filled out the rest. Address a motel on 4th Street. Previous employment none. Education high school. He signed the bottom. He handed it to me. When do I start? He asked, his voice low. Monday morning, I said, taking the paper. 6 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. My foreman doesn't tolerate lateness. And Trey, he looked up. Wear boots, I said. Good ones. You are going to need them. He stood up. He grabbed his old boots from by the door and put them on. He looked at the apartment one last time. He looked at the luxury he had thrown away for a quick buck. Thank you, Mr. Banks, he said quietly. He opened the door and walked out. I closed it behind him. I walked back to the balcony. I looked down at the street. A few minutes later, I saw him walking out of the building. He looked small from up here, just another worker in a city of millions. I took a sip of my coffee. He would either quit in a week or he would build a life. It was up to him now. I had given him the only thing that mattered, opportunity. And for the first time in his life, he had taken it. The morning sun over Atlanta was not just light, it was a validation. It streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse on the 25th floor, warming the oak floorboards and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny stars. I sat in my Eames lounge chair, the leather soft and worn in all the right places, holding a cup of Ethiopian blend coffee. It was black, no sugar, no cream, and certainly no secret ingredients from a greenhouse. I took a sip. The bitterness was clean. It was honest. It woke up my senses in a way that the fear of the last 6 months never could. For a long time, I had woken up wondering if I would survive the day. Now I woke up wondering how I would spend it. That shift in perspective is the true definition of freedom. I picked up the remote control from the glass side table. I didn't turn on the cartoons or the sports channel. I turned on the local news. I knew what was coming. Steinberg had texted me earlier to say that the sentencing hearing was being broadcast live. The fall of a prominent socialite was too juicy for the networks to ignore. They love a tragedy, especially when it is wrapped in designer clothes and greed. The screen flickered to life. The banner at the bottom read, "Breaking news sentencing of Veronica Banks." And there she was, my wife. Or rather, the woman who used to share my bed while plotting my funeral. She was standing in the courtroom. The orange jumpsuit hung off her frame, making her look smaller than I remembered. Her hair, usually dyed and styled to perfection, was showing gray at the roots. Her face was devoid of makeup, revealing the deep lines of bitterness that had always been there just beneath the surface. The judge was speaking. His voice was stern, booming through the speakers of my television. "Veronica Banks," he said, looking down at her over his spectacles, "you have been found guilty of attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit fraud and grand larceny. Your actions were calculated, cold-blooded, and driven by a greed that shocks the conscience of this court. You betrayed the trust of a husband who provided you with a life of privilege. You sought to shorten his life to extend your bank account." I watched Veronica's face. She didn't cry. She didn't look remorseful. She looked angry. She was glaring at the prosecutor as if he were the one who had poisoned the tea. She still didn't get it. She still thought she was the victim of a cruel universe that had denied her what she deserved. The judge banged his gavel. "I sentence you to 20 years in a federal correctional facility without the possibility of parole for 15 years. You are remanded to custody immediately." The bailiff moved in. He cuffed her hands behind her back. For a split second, she looked directly at the camera. Her eyes met mine through the screen. There was no love there, no regret, just the hollow stare of a predator who realizes the cage door has been locked. I took another sip of coffee. 20 years. She would be 62 when she got out. The prime of her life wasted in a concrete box. She had wanted a secure future. She had wanted a home where the bills were paid and the meals were provided. Well, she got it. The state of Georgia was now her provider. I changed the channel. I didn't need to see her walk out. I had seen enough. I stood up and walked to the balcony. The wind was brisk, whipping my robe around my legs. I looked down at the city. Somewhere down there in the labyrinth of streets Trey was working. It was Monday morning. He would be at the site by now. I imagined him pulling on those heavy boots. I imagined him lifting a bag of cement, his muscles screaming, his hands blistering. I imagined him realizing that the sweat running down his back was the only currency that mattered. I didn't hate Trey. Not really. Hate requires energy, and I was done wasting energy on parasites. I pitied him. He had been molded by a mother who taught him that the world owed him a living. Now the world was teaching him a different lesson. A harder lesson. But a necessary one. If he survived the construction site, if he learned to show up and do the work, he might actually become a man. It was a long shot, but it was more of a chance than he would have had living in my guest room waiting for me to die. I walked back inside and went to my drafting table. It was set up in the corner of the living room, bathed in natural light. A fresh sheet of vellum was taped to the surface. My pencils were sharpened to needle points lined up in a row. For years I had stopped designing. I had let Veronica convince me that I was retired, that I was too old, that my hands shook too much. She had wanted me dormant. She had wanted me to be a statue in my own life. But the shaking had stopped the day she left. I picked up a pencil. I felt the weight of it. Familiar. Comforting. I started to draw. A line, straight and true, then another, an intersection, a foundation. I wasn't designing a skyscraper this time. I was designing a community center for the neighborhood I grew up in, a place with a library, a gym, and a safe garden where old men could drink tea without fear. I was going to build it with my own money, the money they tried to steal, the money they thought was theirs. It would be my legacy. Not a trust fund for ungrateful heirs, but a structure that would shelter people who actually needed it. I worked for hours. The silence of the apartment was not empty. It was full of potential. It was the silence of a blank page waiting for a story. Around noon, I put down my pencil. I stretched my back. I felt strong. My heart, the heart they said was failing, beat with a steady, powerful rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. I walked to the kitchen to refill my cup. I caught my reflection in the black marble of the counter. I saw an old man, yes. My hair was white, my face was lined. But I didn't see a victim. I saw a survivor. I saw a general who had won the war without firing a single shot. I thought about the people watching this story. I thought about the millions of people who let family members walk all over them because of some misplaced sense of duty. I thought about the parents who enable their children and the spouses who ignore the red flags because they are afraid of being alone. I wanted to tell them something. I wanted to shake them and say, wake up. Look at the tea. Look at the bank accounts. Look at the smiles that don't reach the eyes. I sat down at the island and looked directly at you. Trust is a currency, and once you counterfeit it, you lose all value. I spent years building a fortune, but my biggest investment was observing the people closest to me. They mistook my silence for blindness and my generosity for weakness. You can't buy loyalty, but you can certainly pay for the removal of disloyalty. In the end, they didn't just lose my money, they lost the only person who actually cared about them. Never let the parasites convince you that you need them to survive. If you enjoyed this story of justice and resilience, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Turn on notifications so you never miss a beat. Let me know in the comments below, would you have given Trey a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved? I read every single comment. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe, and watch your six.